Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Michael looked at himself in the mirror, carefully adjusting his tie. He knew this wasn't just an ordinary party. It was his wife Laura's company party, and he would finally have the chance to see up close the environment where she spent so many hours of her day. Since she started this new job, something had changed. She always seemed to be involved in more meetings, dinners with colleagues, and seemed to be gradually distancing herself from the life they shared at home. Michael hadn't mentioned this before. Maybe it was just his imagination, maybe it was just the fast pace of work. As they descended the building stairs, Laura was stunning. Dressed in an elegant blue dress, she carried a smile that seemed nervous, which Michael found strange. "It's normal to be a little anxious. You don't go to many work parties with me," she commented, trying to break the silence that had formed between them. He gave a soft smile in response, but his stomach was already starting to show signs of unease. The party was being held in a luxurious hotel. The bright lights, refined decor, and ambient music created a welcoming yet imposing atmosphere. As soon as they arrived, Laura was greeted with warm hugs and animated greetings from her colleagues. Michael felt out of place for a moment, knowing no one besides his wife. She introduced him to some colleagues, and they exchanged a few cordial words, but he couldn't help noticing how she always seemed to be attentive to something, or someone, on the other side of the room. As they mingled among the guests, Michael noticed Laura's boss, David, a middle-aged man with a confident and charismatic demeanor. He recognized him from photos and stories Laura had mentioned from time to time, always with admiration. What he didn't expect was the familiarity he saw between them. David approached, greeting Laura with a broad smile, and they began to converse as if they were old friends. Michael, standing beside them, felt almost invisible as they exchanged laughs and inside jokes. Something didn't seem right, but he tried to push the thought away. After all, it was just a party. While Laura and David continued their conversation, Michael watched out of the corner of his eye, trying to convince himself that it was just part of the work dynamic, nothing more. But the easy laughter, the glances, the way they moved in the space as if they were alone, all of it created an uncomfortable feeling deep in his mind. He didn't know if it was fatigue or sudden paranoia, but the night that began with anticipation was starting to take a different turn than he had imagined. Michael, trying to compose himself, grabbed a glass of wine and walked around the party, observing everything around him. The soft music filled the environment while the laughter and conversations of the other guests echoed through the hall. He forced a smile whenever someone greeted him, but his mind was distant, focused on the interaction he had just witnessed between Laura and David. Something didn't fit. As much as he tried to convince himself that it was just part of the job, the intimacy they displayed was unsettling. And the more he observed, the more he noticed small details that would have previously gone unnoticed. From where he was, Michael could see Laura from afar, laughing at something David had said. The way she tilted her head to listen better, how she lightly touched his arm while they talked, they were subtle gestures, but enough to make his stomach churn. David, in turn, seemed completely at ease, as if that closeness was the most natural thing in the world. Michael wondered how long this had been happening and, more importantly, why he hadn't noticed before. At one point, David made a joke, the kind that only someone very familiar could understand, and Laura let out a loud laugh, drawing the attention of some colleagues. Michael, standing beside them, felt like an intruder. They moved in a synchronized way, as if they had practiced that dance of glances and smiles for a long time. It was impossible to ignore the growing discomfort settling inside him. Why had she never talked about David at home like this? Why was he discovering this version of Laura only now, in that environment? Michael tried to distract himself, but his mind kept returning to the two of them. He looked around the party, searching for something that could take his attention away from that discomfort, but it seemed all paths led him back to the same place, the way Laura and David behaved together. As the night progressed, Michael began to realize that he was the only one who didn't see this as normal. The other guests seemed indifferent, perhaps accustomed to this dynamic. But for him, everything was new and unsettling. The noise around the party began to seem distant, almost muffled. Michael felt a kind of emptiness growing inside him. It wasn't just the closeness that bothered him, it was the fact that he had never seen that part of Laura's life. The hours she spent at work, the meetings, the outings after work, all of it seemed to have more layers than he had imagined. He felt like a stranger, someone who was being introduced to his own wife for the first time. Even so, Michael tried to convince himself that he was exaggerating, that it was just his insecurity speaking louder. Maybe it was the drink, or maybe the fact that he had never attended these events before. He tried to rationalize, but the complicit smiles between Laura and David continued to echo in his mind. Every time he looked at them, it was as if the environment around him closed in. He could no longer see the other guests, no longer hear the music. All he saw was that uncomfortable closeness, those gestures and laughs that seemed to be from a world to which he did not belong. And then, as he watched Laura and David once again, something inside Michael changed. He couldn't quite explain it, but it was as if a curtain had been lifted. The doubt that had been gnawing at him began to solidify into certainties. Small certainties, fragments of a truth he was not yet ready to face, but that were already beginning to take shape within him. The weight of these certainties began to accumulate in Michael's chest, but he still fought against them, as if he could somehow ignore what his eyes were seeing. He stood up from the table where he was sitting, taking a long sip of wine, trying to calm his nerves. He needed to get out of that environment for a few minutes, clear his mind, and maybe, just maybe, realize that he was making up stories in his head. "I'm going to the bathroom," he said to himself, as if that were the only reason to step away. He passed by some of Laura's colleagues who greeted him briefly, but their words were like distant murmurs. He had only one focus, to distance himself from the party. Walking through the corridors, the hotel walls seemed narrow, and the sound of the party behind him slowly disappeared, as if it were being left behind not only physically but emotionally as well. With each step, he felt he was moving away from a reality he no longer wanted to face. Upon leaving the bathroom, Michael took a deep breath. Maybe when he returned to the hall, he could see everything differently. Maybe the perspective he needed was simply to step away for a few minutes and return with a clearer mind. He shook his head, as if trying to expel the troubling thoughts, but as he turned to return to the party, something made him stop. On the opposite side of the corridor, in a more isolated area of the hall, he saw Laura again. Only this time, she wasn't conversing with any other colleague or exchanging smiles with the other employees' spouses. She was there with David, in a conversation that seemed much more intimate than anything Michael had witnessed that night. Their words were low, whispered. They were far enough away that no one from the party could see them, no one except Michael. For a moment, he hesitated. His first impulse was to turn away, avoid seeing what was happening. Maybe he didn't really want to know. Maybe it was better to pretend he hadn't seen anything, return to the party, and continue the night as if everything was normal. But something inside him, a force he couldn't control, compelled him to keep watching. Then it happened. In the middle of the conversation, David got closer to Laura. Michael barely had time to process what he was about to see. David tilted his head and, without hesitation, planted a quick kiss on his wife's lips. A furtive kiss, but full of meaning. It wasn't a long or passionate kiss, but enough to make Michael's heart stop for a moment. The ground seemed to crumble beneath his feet. He blinked several times, hoping his eyes had deceived him. But no. What he saw was real. What he had been suspecting all night was now laid bare before him. The weight of betrayal, which had previously been just a shadow in his mind, now hit him like a direct punch to the stomach. His lungs seemed unable to breathe, and the wine he had drunk rose back to his throat with a bitter taste. But he couldn't react there, not at that moment, not in that place. If there was one thing Michael knew, it was that he needed to stay calm. It wasn't time for confrontations. His body became paralyzed, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts, but his expression remained cold. With one last look, he slowly moved away from the corridor, without Laura or David noticing his presence. As he returned to the hall, Michael felt empty. The sound of the party, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all now seemed distant and irrelevant. He was no longer part of that world. Whatever had been built between him and Laura over the years now seemed to silently crumble, without anyone else knowing what was happening. Sitting back at the table, Michael said nothing. The party continued around him, but he was no longer part of the celebration. Inside him, something had changed forever. The image of Laura and David, so close and intimate, was now engraved in his mind, and he knew that nothing would be the same from that moment on. Back at the party, Michael seemed to move automatically. His body was present, but his mind wandered to a very distant place, fixated on the image he had just witnessed. Every detail of the kiss between Laura and David replayed in his head like a movie he couldn't stop watching. The hall was full of people, but for him, it was as if everything was silent. He looked around, but the voices, the music, the lights, all had become a distant blur. Laura returned to the table shortly after, radiant, as if nothing had happened. She kissed him on the cheek, asking if he was okay, if he needed another drink. Michael, expressionless, just nodded, trying to respond with the greatest possible neutrality. His mind, however, was in conflict. Part of him wanted to scream, confront her right there in front of everyone, ask what was happening, why she had crossed that line. But another part, the colder and more rational one, knew that it would be pointless to do that there. He needed time, needed to think. And above all, he needed to understand what that betrayal meant to him, to their marriage, to the future. The wine glass in front of him seemed not to diminish, no matter how many sips he took. The taste no longer mattered. His throat was dry, and his hands, once steady, now trembled slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough that he needed to hold them in his lap, hiding the agitation. Everything seemed to move in slow motion. Michael could see Laura interacting with her colleagues, laughing, talking about the night's success. She was the perfect image of the dedicated wife, involved with her work, but for Michael, that now felt like a painful lie. As Laura and David continued their interactions, each smile exchanged between them felt like a blow. And not just because of the kiss. Michael now saw everything through a new lens. He began to realize that the small gestures, the discreet glances, the jokes only they understood, all were part of something much bigger that he still didn't know the extent of. He wondered how long they had been in that relationship, whether it was just a recent thing or if he had been deceived for months, or even years. The truth, however, hit him with a crushing weight, that no longer mattered. He felt that, at that moment, something inside him had changed irrevocably. It wasn't just the act of betrayal itself, but the trust that had been broken, the complicity he thought existed between them and that was now forever tainted. He realized, as he looked at Laura, that this would be his last night as her husband. This was a decision he had already made in silence, without needing big explosions or confronting her there and then. The silence between them in the car on the way home would be just the reflection of a marriage that had ended at that party, the moment Michael saw what he could no longer ignore. The betrayal was not just a kiss. It was the accumulation of gestures, moments, things unsaid that had been revealed that night under the lights of that party which, ironically, seemed like a celebration but for him was the end of everything. The wine, the laughter, the smiles between her and David, Michael now saw it all completely. The pieces of the puzzle he had ignored for so long finally fit together. He realized that the silence he maintained now was not just the refusal to confront reality. It was the acceptance that he already knew what would come after that night. When the party finally ended, Michael and Laura left the hall together, but the silence between them was almost palpable. The sound of their steps echoed in the hotel's lobby, and as much as Laura tried to start casual conversation, Michael could only respond with monosyllables. With each word from her, he felt a pang in his chest, as if she were speaking of a reality that no longer belonged to him. The walk to the car was brief, but for Michael, it seemed like an eternity. He could hear the sound of their own breathing mixed with the car's engine roaring to life, but the emotional silence between them was deafening. During the drive back, the city lights passed by the window, creating reflections of a night that, to anyone else, might seem ordinary. For Michael, however, each light that illuminated his face reflected the darkness he felt inside. He looked at the busy streets, the unknown faces of people passing by without knowing the turmoil unfolding inside the car. The steering wheel firm in his hands was the only point of contact with reality. He drove on autopilot, without really thinking about the destination. The only thing he knew clearly was that this night would be his last as Laura's husband. Laura, sitting beside him, continued to try to maintain a light conversation. She commented on the party, the colleagues, the event's success. It was as if nothing had happened, as if she were living in a world where the betrayal Michael had witnessed didn't exist. But for him, each word from her was a cruel reminder of the lie that now permeated everything between them. He wondered how she could act so naturally after everything that happened that night. Maybe it was habit, maybe she was so accustomed to living that facade that she didn't even realize the veil had fallen. Maybe, he thought, she simply didn't imagine that he knew. The drive back home was dominated by this growing silence, a silence that spoke more than any discussion or confrontation could. It was the silence of the end, an end that, at that moment, only Michael understood. He didn't need answers, he didn't need explanations. Everything was already clear. The betrayal, to him, was not just the kiss he witnessed but all the moments when he trusted blindly, all the times she disguised, smiling at him while the truth was hidden in plain sight. Arriving home, Laura got out of the car, still oblivious to what was going on in Michael's mind. He watched her as she walked toward the front door, as if it were just another day, another night like any other. Michael turned off the car's engine and remained seated for a moment, looking at the house where so many memories had been built. It was strange to think that all of that, the home they shared, the moments of intimacy, the conversations, the promises, now seemed distant, as if belonging to another life. A life that, for him, had ended at that party. Entering the house, he realized how every detail seemed the same, but at the same time, everything had changed. The furniture, the photos on the wall, the familiar smell of home, all remained, but inside him, nothing held the same meaning anymore. Laura went upstairs, still talking about how tired she was and how she could hardly wait to lie down. Michael followed her in silence, each step heavier than the last. Upon reaching the bedroom, he watched Laura getting ready for bed, still carefree, still living the illusion that the next day would be like any other. For her, maybe it would be. But for Michael, this was the last night. He looked at her lying in bed, eyes already closed, and realized that their marriage, in fact, had ended long before that night. The betrayal was just the trigger, the final point of a story that had been silently unraveling for a long time. That night, Michael lay down next to Laura, but the abyss between them was insurmountable. There was nothing more to be said. The words that could have been used to resolve conflicts, the conversations that might have saved the relationship, all that now seemed irrelevant. Silence settled definitively, not as a pause, but as an end. He knew that, at dawn, the decision would be made. As the minutes dragged on that last night, Michael stayed awake, looking at the ceiling, with the soft sound of Laura's breathing beside him. She slept deeply, unaware that when she woke up, the man beside her would no longer be the husband she thought she knew. That morning, when the sun was just starting to peek through the gaps in the curtain, Laura woke up slowly, still feeling enveloped in the calm of a peaceful night. But upon opening her eyes, something seemed different. The bed beside her was unmade, but Michael wasn't there. Her eyes wandered around the room, and then she saw the suitcases, 2 large suitcases, carefully placed next to the door. Her heart raced instantly, a sudden chill running up her spine. Before she could fully process what was happening, Michael entered the room with a serene but cold expression she had never seen before. He didn't say anything for a few seconds. He stood there, just looking at her. The silence between them was dense, loaded with a tension that Laura couldn't understand, or didn't want to understand. "Michael, what's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. He didn't respond immediately. He took a deep breath, crossed his arms, and finally, with a calm and direct voice, said, "I saw you too, Laura. You and David. Near the bathroom. I saw the kiss." Laura froze. Her heart skipped a beat, and the blood seemed to drain from her face. For a moment, she was speechless, trying to assimilate what he had said. She opened her mouth, but the words didn't come out immediately. "Michael, no. You're misunderstanding. It was just a conversation. It was nothing, I swear. I love you." She got up from the bed quickly, walking toward him, almost desperate. "It was just a moment, I don't even know why, it was a mistake." He looked at her, impassive, as if her words were small, desperate attempts to extinguish a fire that had already consumed everything. Michael was no longer angry. He had gone through that phase the previous night. Now, there was only certainty. "Laura, this wasn't just a moment. It was a choice. You chose to betray my trust. And more than that, you undid everything we built. It's no use trying to explain now. But we're married. We have a life together, Michael. This can't end because of a mistake." Laura's voice was full of pleading but also disbelief, as if she still couldn't accept what was happening. Michael looked into her eyes and, with a firmness almost painful, said, "Laura, when we got married, I already had this house. I already had the money we have in the bank. You accepted the conditions and agreed to that. The house is mine. The money is mine. Please, take your things and leave." She was stunned, as if the world was collapsing around her. Her hands trembled. You can't be serious," she murmured, her voice shaking. But Michael didn't back down. "I'm very serious. I want you to leave, now." Laura looked at the suitcases, her face pale, as if she couldn't believe this was really happening. She opened her mouth to protest once more, but the words died before being spoken. She knew it was useless. She muttered a few low words, still in shock, and slowly walked to the suitcases. She grabbed the handles with trembling hands, struggling to hold back tears, and left the room without looking at him. Michael heard her steps descending the stairs, the front door opening, and the distant sound of her car leaving. He stood there for a long time until the silence of the empty house was all that remained. Weeks passed. The divorce was underway, and finally, the day came when they would meet to sign the papers. The meeting was in a cold, formal office. Laura was visibly worn out but tried to maintain her composure. Michael, on the other hand, was serene, as if he had made peace with what had happened. Before signing, Laura, almost as a last gesture of pride, said, "David rented an apartment for me. I'm fine. I don't need anything from you." Michael just nodded slightly, without saying anything. He already knew there was nothing more to be said between them. They signed the papers in silence, and in the end, she left without looking back. Months later, Michael received news that made him pause for a moment, more out of surprise than anything else. David, Laura's boss, was married. And when his wife discovered the affair, he refused to stay with Laura. She insisted, pressured him, and instead of taking responsibility for the relationship, he simply fired her. Laura, who had clung to David as her lifeline, was now alone. Michael, on the other hand, moved on. He sold the house where so many memories had been built, and destroyed, and moved to another city. He found peace in that new life, away from bitter memories and silent betrayals. He didn't regret anything. He knew that, despite the pain, he had done what was right. Now, he could finally move forward, free from a past that no longer defined him. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.
I feel completely lost because I just found out that my 42-year-old wife, with whom I've been married for 12 years, has been having an affair. The police called me in for questioning about the assault on her lover, and right now, I don't know what to do. My mind is not clear, and I'm seeking some direction. We have an amazing 11-year-old son, and until last night, I believed we had a good marriage. I thought I treated her well, and we didn't face any financial or confidentiality issues. I used to wake up every morning thankful that she's my wife, but now I'm unsure about everything. Yesterday, I received a call from my local police department as I was finishing work, asking me to come to the police station as soon as possible. This made me panic, and I asked if something had happened to my wife or son. They assured me not to worry and just come to the station quickly. Upon arrival, they placed me in a room with a table and chairs, asked for my name, and then started questioning me about a guy my wife works with. I haven't seen or talked to this guy since December 2019. At my wife's company Christmas party, the officers repeatedly asked me how long I've known and how I found out. After an hour of this, I stopped answering their questions and kept asking about the safety of my son and wife. We went back and forth for about 2 hours, with breaks in between when they left the room for 15 to 20 minutes, only to return and restart the questioning, resembling some low-budget cop show. The last time they entered, the cop handed me a tablet and showed me a video of my wife and the guy from her work being closeness. After that, I don't recall much, except for repeatedly screaming in shock and having a full-blown panic attack in the middle of the police station. A paramedic checked my high blood pressure, and despite the recommendation to go to the hospital, I refused, insisting I needed to find my wife and son. Once I calmed down, the officers explained that the guy in the video had an affair with my wife and apparently several other women. That morning, he was found in critical condition in his driveway, having been thumped, ruined, and set on fire. They didn't know if he would survive. His wife gave permission to check his phone and computer, where they found the video of my wife. They asked where I was that morning, and I told them the gym, then work about 10 minutes from the gym. At that point, they said I could leave, but suggested I might not want to stay at my house because they weren't sure if his affair with my wife could be the reason for the attack. They also mentioned my wife wasn't the only person he had an affair with, prompting me to rush home. My son was staying with our neighbors, so I picked him up and we packed some clothes and his school laptop. I grabbed my weapon and we headed to my parents' house, 45 minutes away. I still haven't heard from my wife. Her phone is going straight to voicemail. I called the officer who gave me his card, and he informed me that she is at the hospital with the guy she's been cheating with. I'm here in bed with my son on one side and my 38 on the other. My dad is sleeping in his chair in the living room with an auto shotty across his lap, and I haven't slept in over 30 hours. I don't even know where to start. Any help would be appreciated right now. Update. I learned from my lawyer that the police have significant authority, especially if you're not under arrest. They can pretty much do or say anything, even lie directly to your face, which is what happened. Turns out, when I contacted the detective, my wife wasn't at the hospital with her lover. She had been admitted to the psychiatric facility earlier that day while he was still in surgery. I don't know why they lied about it, but it's made me highly suspicious of law enforcement. After waking up that afternoon, I reached out to my uncle's law partner, who's also a family friend. He came to my parents' house, discussed my options with me, and his entire law firm is now handling both my divorce and criminal defense. On that Sunday, he obtained an emergency custody order and a protective order against my wife for me, my son, and my parents. Our court date is in 60 days. The police served her on Monday as she was leaving the psychiatric hospital. According to her brother, who's a close friend of mine, she didn't take it well and is staying with her parents for the time being. I still haven't talked to her, and she hasn't made any attempt to speak to me either. Whether it's due to shame, indifference, or the order of protection, I don't know, but I'm glad nonetheless. My wife isn't the person I thought she was, and I feel ashamed for not realizing it sooner. I had to tell my son the truth, age-appropriate and straightforward. His first words were a plea not to let mommy take him away. When I asked why, he told me my wife had been treating him poorly when I wasn't around, threatening to take him away if he told me, saying he'd never see me again. She's been emotionally torturing our son, and I was too blind to see it. That hurt me more than the video, to be honest. I informed the lawyer about my son's revelation, and he used it, along with her mental state and commitment, to secure emergency custody. I've contacted his school for therapy resources, and he will start therapy after the first of the year. I feel like the worst father at this point. Regarding our families, her parents contacted me on Tuesday, wanting to see us. I was still at my parents' house and allowed them to come, but she wasn't allowed near us. They agreed. They were apologetic, and her mother cried the entire time. Her father was heartbroken and referred to my wife as that girl. They both felt something was wrong with her and didn't raise her to be this way. We hugged and cried before they left, and I assured them they'll always be part of our lives, regardless of the divorce. After what my son told me, their visit was the hardest part of our whole ordeal. My lawyers have been doing excellent work. They found out that the man my wife was sleeping with has a lengthy criminal record. One lawyer told me that when they printed out the guy's arrest record, the printer ran for 5 minutes straight. From what they learned, he's currently on parole for medication offenses and has had gang affiliations in the past. He's still alive but in critical condition and may not make it. The firm has an investigator who contacted the co-worker who drove my wife to the hospital. The co-worker revealed that my wife's affair was an open secret around the office. My lawyers think that's how the police figured out who I and my wife were. In the video, there are several photos from last year's Christmas party at her work, and my wife and I are in several of them. That's where I am currently in this whole situation. I'm just numb, still lost, and heartbroken. How long does the numbness last? And is there any way to get past this emotional lethargy faster? I mean, really numb, like a dream. Everything I've just said has felt like it's happening to someone else, no doubt. Update. I apologize for the long message, but I needed to express my feelings this week. First, my son is improving significantly. He began therapy in early January, and the change is already noticeable. I asked if it was okay to talk to his therapist, and he agreed. So, I've had a few discussions with her. The therapist mentioned that my soon-to-be ex verbally and emotionally mistreated our son when they were alone. He couldn't make noise or bother her, and she'd leave him alone for long periods, even overnight when I was away. She threatened him not to speak up, saying he'd be taken away and never see me again. The therapist noted that this has left him feeling powerless and dependent at a critical stage in his development when he should be feeling empowered and self-reliant. To address this, I bought him his own phone and helped him memorize family members' numbers and relevant addresses. I've been teaching him situational awareness, paying attention to street names, and reading addresses and buildings. We've also role-played how to ask for help and explain to strangers when he feels unsafe. Despite it being a short time, I can see that it's really boosting his confidence. Any suggestions on how to continue building his self-reliance would be appreciated. His safety and well-being are still my top priorities. Regarding myself, I'm doing as well as expected. I started therapy around the same time as my son, and though I don't talk to my therapist as much as he does, it has helped to discuss my thoughts and feelings about everything that has happened to us and our family. The numbness is gone, replaced by a white-hot ball of anger in the pit of my stomach whenever I think of my soon-to-be ex and what she's put her family through. Strangely, although I dislike feeling angry, it's easier to deal with than the numbness. My therapist says this is part of the grieving process, and it's not just how we feel, but how we channel those emotions that matters. My legal situation is honestly the scariest thing I've dealt with in my life. I was granted temporary full custody and child support, which I didn't want, but my lawyer insisted we ask for it, along with a continuation of the order of protection for myself and my son. During the order hearing, which neither my wife nor her lawyer attended, the judge asked if we would allow supervised visits, but my son refused, prompting my lawyer to advise bringing him along. The judge asked my son if he would speak to him alone, and he agreed. After their meeting, the judge granted the temporary orders and ordered therapy and a psychological evaluation for my son. Fortunately, the therapist he is seeing is somehow involved with or accredited to work with the courts, so he doesn't have to see another therapist. My lawyer says this is good because it means his therapist can provide a custody recommendation, but it still scares me that she could get some form of custody after what she put him through. As for the affair partner, I don't know much. According to my lawyers, he's still alive but still in the hospital. I haven't heard from the police since my initial interview, so there's nothing new to report there. As for my soon-to-be ex, I still haven't seen her since D-Day. I was questioned until Thursday. She has attempted to call me a few times, but I haven't answered. And when she called from another number, I hung up immediately. I have nothing to say to her, and I don't want to hear anything she has to say to me. Her lawyer requested a preliminary hearing for our court-appointed mediation. She was served the second week of January. She was there with her lawyer, and I know this might sound trivial, but even with the mask, she looked bald. My soon-to-be ex was always an attractive and athletic woman. I swear, in our wedding photos, she looks like a supermodel. But now, seeing her significant weight loss is disturbing. She appears sickly and weak. During most of the training, she avoided looking at me, keeping her face down. In short, their requests were absurd. They sought validation during the divorce and shared custody, even asking us to drop the operations. Surprisingly, she wants to live together until the divorce is finalized, and no, I'm not joking. After everything, she insists on staying in the same house. It was so insulting that I had a throbbing headache throughout the entire meeting, but it was all worthwhile for the major revelation we shared with her lawyer. When her lawyer inquired about handling asset division, my lawyer, with a shocked expression, responded, "What division of assets? Read the prenup." The look on her lawyer's face was priceless because she hadn't informed him about the prenup. My late uncle, who founded the law firm I use, crafted the prenup and even hired a lawyer for her before our marriage. According to my lawyer, it's exceptionally well structured as we never mixed finances. The house we live in was a gift from my uncle, with all utilities and insurance in my name. Vehicles are registered in the owner's name only, and we never signed for each other's debts. We have a shared savings account for household needs and emergencies. But she has already drained it, leaving less than $300 from an initial $8,000. The prenup stipulates a 50-50 division of marital assets and debt, with ownership reverting to the individual who accrued intangible assets and personal debt. The infidelity clause states that admitting or being caught in infidelity forfeits the right to claim any form of spousal support. There's more to it, and my lawyer assures me that breaking this prenup is nearly impossible because it's the fairest he's ever read. However, her lawyer's last request bothered me. He suggested postponing official mediation for 6 months while she attends rehab for substance mistreat, a concern raised by some. I hadn't considered it, but my lawyer and I will discuss and decide. After talking to my lawyer, my soon-to-be ex literally spoke for the first time, asking me to read a letter she wrote. Despite my lawyer's warning, I decided to read it when I got home. It started with the expected cheater's apologies, expressions of love, regret for mistreating our son, and a desire for us again. She explained that after a major surgery 2 years ago, she began abusing medication, buying from people at work, including her affair partner, who eventually became her go-to source. When she ran out of money, she resorted to sleeping with him to get more. She said she hid this from me out of fear I'd make her stop, claiming he meant nothing to her but a way to satisfy her weakness. She now acknowledges the gravity of her actions, wants to change for our family, and asks for time to prove her commitment. I want to clarify that I'll never reconcile with my wife. Our marriage ended when she cheated and mistreated our son. However, I feel like the most naive person for not noticing sooner. I'm torn between discarding her or feeling justified in my sense of betrayal. Right now, I'm overwhelmed with anger and resentment towards her. But am I handling someone battling their demons appropriately? I feel lost and hopeless. Any advice would be greatly appreciated.
My husband used videos of me cheating to expose my affair to my dad and exact his ultimate revenge. My lover got out of bed and went to his adjoining hotel room to get ready for the day. We always booked 2 adjoining rooms with a connecting door to avoid suspicion. It wouldn't be good if our affair was discovered. I was Dan's executive assistant, and we had worked together for over 2 years, being lovers for most of that time. Due to my role, we often traveled together across the country for meetings and conferences, giving us plenty of time together without raising eyebrows. I was married, and my husband stayed at home. My marriage was a fast wedding at 18 after I got pregnant by my high school boyfriend, Alan. When our parents found out, mine wanted me to adopt the baby, but his parents insisted we keep her and offered their help. Alan supported me through the pregnancy despite the judgment from others. After a difficult labor, we welcomed our daughter, Lauren, 2 days after my 19th birthday and decided to keep her. My parents nearly disowned me, so we moved in with Alan's parents, who helped raise Lauren. After graduating, we both got jobs, married in a simple ceremony, and moved into a small house. Our plans for university were postponed when we had another daughter, Emma. Over the next decade, with hard work and support, we both earned university degrees while working part-time and raising our daughters. Alan was very close to the girls, but my relationship with them was strained. We often fought, and I sometimes resented them, blaming them for the life I had to give up. After graduation, I became the executive assistant to Dan Johnson, the business development manager for a medical device company. I was 32 and he was 41. We quickly became a strong professional team and I loved my job. Sales were increasing, management was happy, and I got a raise. My job involved a lot of travel, often with Dan, which was exciting. We visited new places, met clients, negotiated deals, and interacted with executives. Though I was away from home 3 weeks out of 4, the experience was fantastic. Dan and I spent a lot of time together and became close. Despite our age difference, he was married with 3 young children. To prevent Alan from worrying about my travels, I lied that I mostly traveled alone or with another woman and downplayed my relationship with Dan. In truth, I was fascinated and attracted to Dan. We often found cozy restaurants for dinner, wine, and long conversations. About months in, after landing a big sales order, we celebrated with a special dinner and champagne. That night, Dan confessed his love for me. My heart raced, and after a moment of hesitation, I followed him to his room. We spent the night together. The next morning, I felt guilty but justified it as an experience I deserved, since I hadn't had the chance to explore relationships when I was younger. I also realized I had forgotten Emma's 11th birthday the night before. Despite the guilt, I acknowledged my involvement as Dan smiled and squeezed my hand on the plane home. When I got home, the guilt hit me again. Alan was happy to see me after a week away, but I avoided his hugs and kisses. That night, I declined his advances, claiming I was tired, though I was also sore from being with Dan. It was the first time I had ever turned Alan down. Our affair, which began 18 months ago, continued non-stop. Over time, I got over the guilt and hid my secret from Alan, emotionally disconnecting from him and our girls. My thoughts were always about Dan. Lying became second nature, and I didn't feel guilty anymore. I had fallen deeply in love with Dan and occasionally thought about leaving Alan for him. As our company expanded, Dan and I traveled more often for work. When there were no scheduled trips, we created fake business trips and spent the night in a nearby hotel. We also took short vacations together, using conferences as an alibi. We were careful at work, always behaving professionally and never meeting alone. We communicated through secret email accounts and never met in our town at home. I argued with Alan about my demanding boss and frequent travel. He often suggested finding a job with less travel, but I told him I was learning too much and earning well. During rare work events with partners, we were very cautious, briefly introducing our spouses before mingling with others. No one suspected anything. Alan was happy with my career success, but annoyed by my frequent absences, which left him to handle most of the child rearing on top of his IT job. Although I still loved Alan, we were drifting apart, and our affection had dwindled. I felt guilty and made a mental note to try to make it up to him. We had a rough start in life early on, having our first child at, getting married at, and having another shortly thereafter. Through hard work and teamwork, we managed to graduate from university, me with a degree in information technology, and Amy with a degree in commerce, all while raising 2 girls. We overlooked the difficulties because we loved each other deeply. When Amy got her first professional job after graduation about 2 years ago, she was overjoyed, and I was very proud of her. Finally, we were both working professionally, earning a good salary, and could begin enjoying a normal life together. At first, I supported her career in every way I could, but I grew increasingly resentful of the long hours she worked and the amount of traveling she did. She left home around in the morning and usually didn't get home until, or in the evening. Most weeks she would be gone for at least 1 or 2 nights, sometimes more, and occasionally she wouldn't get home until Saturday afternoon. When she was home during the week, she either worked after dinner or just sat in front of the TV. On Saturdays, she would sleep late and then go shopping. On Sundays, she would go to the gym in the morning and then have lunch with her girlfriends. She was usually too tired to go out with me in the evening. We didn't spend much family time together. She was always too busy at work to take vacations, so the girls and I often vacationed without her. I noticed that her character was changing. The loving wife and mother was gone, replaced by a selfish, often irritated, and aloof person, and sharing my bed. Whenever I tried to bring it up, I was immediately rebuffed. She would say it was just my imagination, or that she was tired from work, or she was working hard for us, or that everything was fine. I worried about how it might end. At the end of her first year, I was required to accompany her to a Christmas party at the CEO's mansion. It was there that I first met her boss, Dan, and his wife. We chatted politely but briefly about nothing, then he bowed out and they went off to socialize. My wife led me to others and started a conversation with the other employees. Later, I thought it was a bit odd. Her boss seemed quite friendly, though a bit reserved, not the ogre Amy had described. Dan's wife was also very pleasant. Since Amy was his executive assistant, I thought we would have more than just polite, cursory conversation. I also sensed that Amy was a little tense. She had a habit of talking really fast when she was nervous, and it gave her away. I thought it was odd that she was nervous around her boss when they worked so closely together. It was perplexing to me. Although I trusted her completely, I still put the thought aside for later. Over the next year, I was very busy as I decided to start my own IT consulting company. Additionally, I was practically single-handedly raising our girls, so I pushed all concerns about Amy to the back burner. Life with Amy was a repeat of the previous year. She started traveling even more often and becoming more distant from all 3 of us. Lately, I began to notice that her attitude toward me was becoming condescending and dismissive. She showed me no love, no affection, nothing. Only occasionally did I receive something without any love or closeness. It was obvious that our relationship was crumbling. At the end of the year, I again attended her staff Christmas party. Our interaction with her boss was a repeat of the previous meeting. Afterward, a fleeting thought crossed my mind that she was hiding something. For the first time since we met, I began to doubt her. Was there another man in her life? The thought was almost overwhelming. We had fought together as a team, overcoming many challenges to get where we were now. She wouldn't do that, would she? What was I supposed to do? I didn't go to the extreme of hiring a private investigator or hacking into her computer, but I began to observe her more closely. I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Either it was my imagination or she was very clever at covering her tracks. Either way, all was not well between us. I guess I was just too busy to bother. Meanwhile, my girls were growing up rapidly. We spent a lot of time together and were very close, although, unfortunately, their mother had little time for them. Both girls were avid soccer players, so every Saturday morning during the season, I went to watch them play. It was the highlight of my week. After the game, we would go out for lunch somewhere, usually to their favorite Japanese restaurant, and chat about what they were doing. I noticed that they almost never mentioned their mother. Afterward, depending on the weather, we would walk on the beach, go to the movies, or go out with friends. After the first game of the season was over, Emma came up to me, accompanied by a new member of the soccer team. She was a charming girl, tall, absolutely beautiful with a wide smile, long dark hair, and deep dark brown eyes. She was also very athletic and had distinguished herself in her first game with Emma's team, scoring 2 goals. "Hi, Daddy, this is C.E. Can I come over and hang out with her this afternoon?" "Hi, C.E. Nice to meet you." "Sure, Emma, as long as Sai's parents don't mind." C turned and called out, "Mom, can Emma come over this afternoon?" The woman, obviously Callie's mom, turned and started walking toward us. Holy crap, she was the adult version of her daughter, and absolutely stunningly beautiful. She introduced herself as Sophie and readily agreed to have Emma come to her house in the afternoon. We chatted for a while, but I'm still not sure exactly what I said. I know I babbled incoherently. After they left, both my girls burst into laughter at my embarrassment and then smirked at each other. In the evening, Emma mentioned that Sophie was very nice. Sophie had been a single mom since Call's father died in a car accident about 3 years ago. Sophie single-handedly raised CI and her younger brother Tom for 11 years. The fact that she was a single mom definitely caught my attention. The following Saturday, as Lauren and I were watching Emma play soccer, Sophie and her son joined us and asked if they could watch with us. I mentally prepared myself to meet her again and was determined not to look foolish. We chatted during the game. She had recently moved to town for a new job and didn't know many people yet. She was very happy that Sai had made a new friend in Emma and complimented me on my good manners. After the match, Emma asked if Sai could come to our house. Sure, Emma, that would be great if that's okay with you, Sophie. Sure, why don't Sai come over now and have lunch with us? Do you like sushi? Yes, I love it. Great, it's a deal. In fact, why don't all three of you have lunch with us? I uttered. Thank you so much for the invitation, Alan, but I'll be in the way of your family, so I won't be coming. I was feeling a little overwhelmed when Lauren spoke up. No, please come, Sophie. It would be really nice to have you with us, and I'd get a woman to talk to for a change. You would be absolutely out of the way, please. She looked at me. If you're sure I won't get in the way, Alan, that would be wonderful. I shook my head and mumbled something incoherent again. As we turned to walk to our cars, Lauren turned to me with a smirk and winked. Lunch was a great success. We, meaning mostly the four girls, chatted for almost 2 hours. I think Tom was glad of the other man's company, and we talked a bit amongst ourselves about computers and soccer. At one point, I heard Sophie very casually ask my girls if their mom ever came to watch their soccer games. Lauren's answer surprised me. No, never. She's not really interested in us. She's only interested in her work and herself. Daddy is our mom too. He's the only one who cares about us. Sophie cast an inquisitive glance at me. During the rest of the soccer season, we got into the habit of having lunch together after every game. Emma and Sai became close friends and alternated between our houses after the game and sometimes after school. Sometimes Tom would come over with his sister too, but more often than not, he wanted to spend time with me. We often fiddled with computers, kicked a ball around, or rode bikes. I also noticed that Lauren often stopped by Sophie's house, and the two of them would sometimes go shopping and then stop for coffee and a chat. I noticed that my girls never mentioned Sophie to their mother, and neither did I. Sophie and I were becoming firm friends too. Since I was pretty much a single parent like her, it was much easier for us to help each other with parenting. After soccer season ended, we were increasingly alone with the kids on Saturdays when they went on their own field trips or to visit friends. When my wife wasn't usually around, I was pretty much free, so increasingly Sophie and I spent that time in each other's company, walking, eating lunch, or watching movies. I looked forward to our meetings more and more, and realized that I had fallen in love with her. Despite this, we never crossed the line of friendship. One day, over a cup of coffee with Sophie, I told her that I appreciated her spending time with Lauren. You know, she's never quiet about you when she gets home, Sophie this, Sophie that. I laughed. Well, and Tom is never quiet about you when he comes to see you. Alan this, Alan that. She laughed back. Seriously, he needs a male figure in his life, so I appreciate you spending time with him. Then she suddenly said, Forgive me for being blunt, Alan, but it seems pretty obvious that all is not well between you and your wife. We never discussed Amy, carefully avoiding the subject. I sat in silence for about seconds. It was a question I had long pushed to the back of my mind and avoided discussing. The truth is, Sophie, if it weren't for the girls, I'd probably be long gone. Things have been really bad for a few years now. I've tried to talk to her many times, but I've hit a brick wall. Our marriage was hard from the beginning. I think Lauren told you about how Amy and I got married. Yes, and she blames herself a bit for putting you in that situation. I know, it's crazy, and I tell her it's not her fault in the slightest. That opened the floodgates for me. I spent the next hour pouring out all my sorrows on Sophie. At the end, she came over and gave me a big hug. It was my first real female hug in forever. I'm here for you whenever you need me, Alex, you know that. I only hugged her tighter and didn't let her go. Soon another year was over, and the annual Christmas party for Amy's co-workers came around again. My reacquaintance with her boss was very similar to the previous 2 years. This time, I was on high alert. Although Amy and her boss seemed much more at ease than before, something was not right. I had a definite suspicion about these two. Toward the end of the evening, Amy excused herself to go to the bathroom. After a minute, I looked over and realized that her boss was also nonchalantly heading upstairs. I decided to follow her and went upstairs looking for her. She wasn't in the bathroom, so I looked all around the huge house and was about to pass the ajar bedroom door when I heard my wife's voice inside. "Merry Christmas, dear," a male voice replied. "Merry Christmas, my love." I peeked through the crack of the door and saw Amy and her boss kissing passionately with their arms wrapped around each other. I quickly backed away in shock. I went downstairs pondering what to do. I was beyond angry, feeling just dead inside. I don't have a temper, so instead of an immediate confrontation, I calmed myself and decided to investigate and make a plan. First, Amy returned shortly afterward, a little out of breath, and spent the rest of the evening pretending to be my loving wife. I, on the other hand, pretended that nothing had happened. By New Year's Eve, working while Amy slept, I hacked into her phone and laptop. Amy should have known better. Keeping evidence on your personal computer, even if it's well hidden, isn't very smart when your husband's occupation is computer hacking. My worst fears were realized. There was a trail of evidence in her work, personal, and secret email accounts. Amy was in a long-term affair with her boss that began over 2 years ago. I also discovered photos and videos showing the depth of her betrayal. From their email correspondence, I realized that Amy and Dan had even discussed leaving their partners to be together. She seemed interested, but her lover was more cautious. I really was a clueless husband. I installed a covert surveillance program on her phone and laptop. I could remotely monitor her every electronic and physical move if I wanted to. My marriage was clearly over. Now I needed to retain custody of my daughters and protect my business and finances. In the new year, I consulted with a divorce attorney. She told me that divorces are no fault, so you can't sue for infidelity. However, in a child custody case, once the children turn, they have the right to decide which parent they want to live with after the marriage breaks up. She also came up with a strategy to protect my company from financial payouts. Emma would turn 14 in 6 months. Until then, I could tolerate living with Amy, and that gave me time to prepare. I had to keep everything a secret from Amy. I told Sophie what I had found out and she cried. It was unexpected. I thought I should be the one most upset and in need of a hug. I held her for a while as she tearfully told me that her husband had been homicidal, driving with his secretary when she went through his belongings after his passaway. She discovered that they had been having an affair. This made his loss even more difficult. When she recovered, we talked more, and I told her about my plans to leave Amy. She grinned and encouraged me to put my plans into action. I first convinced my wife that since we were both making good money now, we should sell our small house and rent a bigger place while we looked for our dream home. We would use the money from the sale to put a down payment on a new house. She readily agreed. Our house sold quickly, and we rented another place nearby. I was a tenant on a lease for only 6 months. I was very sick of sharing a bed with Amy when she was home. When we moved into the rental house, I got a bad cold. I used that as an excuse to move into the spare room so I wouldn't have to sleep with her. I never moved back in, and she never commented on it. Maybe she didn't notice, or maybe she just liked it. Then I talked my father, whom I also confided in, into starting a new IT company that he himself owned. I was his only employee. I then closed my own company and started running my business through his company. Everything was going according to plan until I ran into a very nervous and scared Lauren. Lauren was dating her first boyfriend, and I immediately thought she was pregnant, just like what happened to her mom. Dad, this is hard for me to tell you, but Mom is having an affair with her boss. I was shocked that she knew and was speechless for a moment. Really, what makes you think that? Well, right after we moved, Emma and I went back to our old house to pick up some things she'd forgotten. Mom and her boss were there. Well, that's a little weird, but it doesn't prove anything, I said. I know about their affair, Lauren. I've known for a long time. Then why don't you do something about this cheating woman? Emma saw her too. Yes, I called out to Emma, who was hiding within earshot around the corner, and she bashfully entered the room. I hugged them both tightly. I knew how awful it was for them to see this, especially young Emma. Can you both keep a very big secret? They nodded. I plan on leaving your mom soon. I'm just waiting until Emma turns so you both can legally choose who to live with. They both shouted in unison. It won't be easy to keep this secret, but until then, we mustn't do anything to alert your mother. They smiled conspiratorially. Afterward, I asked Sophie to have a chat with Lauren. She had her first boyfriend now, and I didn't want her to follow in her mother's footsteps. Fortunately, Amy didn't show up often, so we could tolerate her occasional presence and keep our secret. We enjoyed it even more when she wasn't home, knowing that the end was near. We spent more and more time with Sophie and her 2 children, often having lunch at each other's houses or going out together. One Friday afternoon, when my wife was supposedly at a conference all weekend but was actually with her boss at the hotel, Lauren said, "Daddy, I'm going to babysit for Sophie today." "Oh, really? What's she doing?" "Going to dinner with a guy at Brazier Paris, you know, that classy French restaurant in town." I immediately felt real jealousy and tried unsuccessfully not to show it. My daughter looked at me with a pitying expression on her face. "She's going on a date with you, you idiot. It's about time you two went on a proper date." "I've already made reservations, so call her now and ask her out properly," she said, holding out her phone to me. "What if she doesn't want to go on a date with me? We're just friends after all. I don't want her to feel awkward. How you ever managed to be smart enough to graduate from university is beyond me. Call her now." I called, and Sophie, judging by the sound of my voice, was absolutely thrilled and immediately agreed. Somehow I got the feeling that it wasn't a surprise. It took me 3 tries that night before my girls were satisfied that I was appropriately dressed for dinner. Just as I was about to leave, C and Tom walked in. In response to my perplexed look, Lauren said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you that they'll be spending the night here tonight. So don't worry about coming home late or not at all if you want." She smiled and handed me an already packed overnight bag. All of our children were obviously involved in a determined plot. When I arrived, Sophie met me at the door. Oh my God, she looked absolutely amazing. "Well, say something, Alan." "I can't. I have no words." "Do you like it?" she asked, twirling around. "Oh, much more than like it, Sophie. I had the best dinner of my life, and we had a wonderful time in each other's company." At the end of the evening, as we walked up to her front door, I said, "I know our children have arranged for me to stay the night, but you don't have to." She said, "Shh, I'm counting on you to stay," and led me inside and into her bedroom. I wasn't going to argue with that. We were a little shy and hesitant at first. I let out all my mental frustrations and felt like I had died and gone to heaven. The next morning, we heard the sound of lots of feet on the stairs, voices outside, and a knock on the bedroom door, which then opened. Lauren poked her head inside. "Good morning, you two. It's almost, and we got tired of waiting, so we came in. Breakfast will be ready downstairs in 20 minutes. Oh, and I'd ask if you had a good evening, but judging by the look on your face, there's no need." She grinned. Laughter was heard outside the door, and they all departed. "How did we manage to get such a wonderful group of children, Sophie?" The breakfast they made was delicious, and it was wonderful to spend it as a family. Later at home, I tried to justify myself to my girls for what had happened between Sophie and me. After all, technically, I had been unfaithful to their mother. They both just rolled their eyes and laughed at my awkwardness. "Dad, it's about time you were happy again. You're not married to Mom anymore anyway. She left you a long time ago. So, what are all you co-conspirators up to?" "Actually, we're all in agreement. Emma and I need a mother, and Cy and Tom need a father. You and Sophie are made for each other, so everyone wins. Even if I thought it was a good idea, Sophie might not." "Papa, truth. Even you should be able to tell how she feels about you and what she wants. Do I have any say in the matter?" "No, absolutely none, Daddy." From the looks on their faces, they were thoroughly amused by all of this. Now I was truly at the mercy of my daughters. A few days later, at dinner, when we were all gathered together, I announced that I intended to go house hunting the following weekend. Sophie asked what kind of house I was looking for. I wanted to be close to the beach, 2 stories with a large family room, a kid's escape room, a large backyard, and a pool. It should have at least 6 bedrooms in case my family ever grows, because you never know. Looking directly at her, I said, "I also want to make sure it will appeal to the woman I might fall head over heels in love with." Sophie stared back for a full minute, then walked over to where I was sitting and kissed me passionately in front of the children. When we took a breath, they watched us in silence, and then exploded with joy, dancing around us. I took that as a yes. After weeks of searching, we found the perfect place. We decided to buy it jointly. She used her husband's life insurance money, and I used the proceeds from the sale of my house as collateral. Everything was ready for a showdown with Amy as Emma's teach birthday, and thus D-Day, approached. Amy announced that she was leaving for days to attend a sales conference on the West Coast. I later checked her email and discovered that she was actually going on vacation with her boss to celebrate their 3rd wedding anniversary on the island of Bali in Indonesia. To avoid arousing suspicion at work, they independently told everyone that they were going on vacation with their families because they were working so hard that they were neglecting them. She would leave work a day earlier than her boss and fly to Bali alone. He would fly in a day later. She would come back to work a day earlier than her boss to make the script look believable. They were getting lazy. Their gimmicks weren't up to their usual standards, as the whole thing could easily unravel if someone checked. Amy flew off to her conference, and we immediately started packing and moving our things to our new home, where Sophie and the kids had moved a month earlier. The Balan god of vengeance, if there is such a thing, was really smiling down on me. The same night Amy arrived, a Gung volcano, an active volcano in Bali, began erupting in full force, spewing clouds of volcanic dust into the air. All air travel in and out of Bali was immediately suspended. Her lover stayed home, and Amy was stuck in Bali alone to celebrate their wedding anniversary. This is impossible to make up. I laughed so hard I almost peed my pants. The volcano continued to erupt, and all flights were still canceled, separating the lovers. Behind the scenes, I checked her emails and messages every day. To myself, the lovers were not happy, and Amy was very resentful of Dan, as if it was his fault. Every once in a while, Amy would call home and tell me how busy she was at a conference and blah blah blah. Typically, I would ask her how things were going at the hotel and ask questions about the city she was supposedly in. When I later gained remote access to her laptop, it turned out that during the phone call, she had been frantically searching the internet for information to come up with plausible answers. Meanwhile, all 6 of us were settling into our new home. I had my attorney file a separation document with the family court. I also obtained temporary custody of my girls from the court after filing their signed statements that they wanted to live with me. As the day of Amy's return approached, all flights were canceled, and I wondered how Amy would handle the situation. She called me one evening and told me that she had made a lot of connections with potential big sales leads at the conference, and her boss had asked her to follow up with them right away before she returned home. I could tell she was very nervous. It's also a good thing she didn't call on the video link, or I wouldn't have been able to contain myself. I just assured Amy that we were fine and I understood. Another week went by, and she was still stuck in Bali. I saw frantic emails and texts between the two lovers. Her boss informed everyone at work that she had to extend her vacation due to a family emergency. Her boss also called me and deeply apologized for causing Amy to be away from home for so long, but it was a big opportunity vital to the company, blah blah blah. I waited for his call and was ready to answer like a dutiful husband to an important working wife. I assured him that I was fine and understood. I then innocently asked him where Amy was going. He began to quickly think of places. I read Amy his letter letting her know where she needed to be. My strategy, of course, was to make her squirm and plant the seeds of doubt in her mind that she had been discovered. I kept assuring my wife when she called that I understood everything, but kept asking her about interesting places in the cities where she was staying. I knew she had researched everything beforehand, so I always asked her a few unexpected trick questions and enjoyed her attempts to give herself away. I was just playing dumb. During one call, I said, "Hey, Amy, did you read about those poor people who are stranded in Bali and can't get home because of the volcano?" There was a moment of silence, then she replied, "Oh yeah, but I didn't pay much attention to it on the news. One of my CO workers was stuck there for 2 weeks. Do you remember Paul Howard and his wife? We met them about 6 months ago. Oh yes, we're working on a project together, and he has to do his part of the work remotely via the internet from his hotel in Nadua. At least the Grand Hyatt isn't a bad place to be stuck." Amy's squeak was heard on the line. Sure enough, it was the hotel she was staying at. Paul hadn't even been to Bali, but she didn't know that. Immediately after the call, she'd moved to a cheap hotel on the other side of the island. She must have prayed she could get away with it. Of course, my 5 girls and son thought the whole farce was hilarious. Yes, Sophie's children were mine now. Finally, after almost 3 weeks, the volcano stopped erupting, and flights from Bali resumed. Amy called me to tell me that her work was over and she would be back on Friday afternoon. I was waiting for her at the airport at our rented and now vacant house. I'd planned this meeting very carefully. When she walked in, I was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. She looked tired and very nervous. Oddly enough, for someone who had been on a business trip for 3 weeks, she had a deep tan. I didn't bother with the usual kiss on the cheek. "Wow, you got a great tan on your business trip. Did you even have time to do anything?" She babbled something, blushing. "Sit down and have a glass of wine with me." I poured wine into my glass and took a sip. "Alan, I'm tired. I just want to go upstairs, take a shower, and rest before dinner. I'm sorry, but we have something to discuss, and it can't wait, so please sit down. The girls are staying the night at a friend's house, so won't be disturbed." The look on Amy's face expressed genuine fear. She thought her game was finally over, and I was about to lower the boom, but she didn't know how to handle it. She reluctantly sat down, and I poured her a glass. I'd rehearsed the speech many times and honed the apologetic face. "You know, things haven't been smooth between us for a long time, Amy. Do you know why?" She looked startled and only mumbled a no. "I'm sorry to have to tell you this, Amy, but I can't sugarcoat it. The truth is that I've met another woman. I love her, and I want to be with her. That's why I've decided to leave you to be with her." A sudden shock struck her, and the frightened expression on her face was replaced by wordless rage. I continued, still apologizing. "I didn't mean for this to happen. It's just that you were away so often, and I got lonely. How dare you do this to me, Alan? After all I've done for you. Who is she? I assume you're entertaining her, blah blah blah." I just sat there with a sorrowful face while she poured out her anger on me for about 5 minutes. "I can see that you're very angry, and that's understandable. It's pointless to continue the conversation now. I'll come back tomorrow around 4 in the afternoon to talk some more. We have a lot to discuss." I left her there and walked back to my new home. A string of angry text messages and voicemails followed me, but I didn't bother to respond. Back home, everyone was wondering how it went. My response? Even better than expected. For dinner, we had pizza and watched a movie together. The girls turned off their phones to avoid communicating with their mother, even though I made it clear to them that they could not cut off contact with her. Why didn't I attack her for her cheating? Because it would have hurt her so much more that way. That night, Sophie and I made tender love, and all my anxiety and tension just melted away. Amy, who the next afternoon I showed up at my old place armed with a folder of papers. I was greeted by a still very annoyed Amy, along with her best friend Claire, a lawyer I had never liked. I saw old emails where CLA had encouraged Amy to continue the affair in the early days when Amy was feeling guilty and thinking about breaking up. I sat down at the table, facing both of them. CLA appeared to be the spokesperson, and offense was the best form of defense. She proceeded to tell me at length what a prick I was and what a wonderful wife and mother Amy was, how I had taken advantage of her while she was away and worked so hard for the family, how I should beg her to come back. If I didn't, she would clean me out in the divorce, take the girls, and I would never see them again. What hypocrites. After last night, they apparently decided that if I knew about her affair with her boss, I would have brought it up. I kept a sad, apologetic, and questioning look on my face. Amy, I realize how much this hurts you, but I guess I'm a little surprised that you're so angry. For quite some time, I haven't felt like you really loved me. You've been physically and emotionally absent from our marriage for the last 3 years. That's utter nonsense, Alan. Of course I've been around. I know I work hard, which often distracts me from my work, but I did it for us. So, tell me, Amy, when was the last time we made love? Amy remained silent. I can tell you it was years ago. Yes, we have physical engaging very rarely, but I was talking about making love. I can tell you the exact date of the last time. Remember years ago? You were away on a business trip and forgot to call Emma on her 5th birthday. She tried to call you several times throughout the evening but never got through. She was so upset. I remember it well. Because Emma's birthday was 2 weeks ago when you were on a business trip and you forgot to call her again. So I thought it was a bad anniversary for us. She threw me a guilty look. Ever since you came home from that trip 3 years ago, somehow our relationship has never been the same. I realized from the look on their faces that I had hit the mark. They looked very uncomfortable and squinted at each other. After all, Amy, we've been sleeping in separate bedrooms for about 6 months now. It doesn't seem to bother you. I can't remember the last time we went out together or went on vacation. It feels like you spend your vacations at work. They both shuddered. When you're home, you're not here with me and your girls. I smiled inwardly as I watched them squirm in their seats. Anyway, Amy, I'm sorry, but I'm going to move on with my life, and I hope for the girls' sake we can make our separation as easy as possible. Reconciliation is really impossible. Who is she? Do I know her? You've met her daughter C, Emma's best friend, a few times. Her mom Sophie and I met at Saturday soccer last year and became friends. I think our friendship grew until we realized we were in love with each other. We had an affair and recently decided to move in together. Before they could say anything else, I placed a large index folder on the table. I've gathered some documents and information for you. Tab A is the separation agreement I filed with the court 2 weeks ago. Tab B is the divorce petition you need to sign. The sooner you sign, the sooner we can move forward. Tab C is the proposed financial settlement. Tab D is the new lease on this house. The lease expires in weeks, so you will have to renew it in your name if you want to stay. Tab E contains all the utility contracts. I gave notice to terminate the agreements in weeks. If you want to stay, you will have to renew them in your name. Tab F has the bank statements. I have withdrawn 60% of the funds from our joint accounts. The credit cards in your name now belong to you. Finally, Tab G is a temporary court order for custody and child support. The girls have decided to move in with me, so custody will be handled by me. Child support will be paid directly from your paycheck at work. Access to visitation has been left open so we can work this out as we see fit. They were stunned that I was so well prepared. Claire began, "You creep. You've been planning this for ages. You're not going to get away with this. We're going to take your IT company, your girls, and your money." Well, yeah, I've been planning this since Christmas. I had an epiphany at your staff Christmas party, Amy. I realized it was over between us, and it was time to act. I watched Amy frantically trying to remember what had happened there. So, selling the house to buy another was a shame, CLA said. I only smiled. As for screwing me, Claire, I don't have a company to take over. I closed it down a few months ago. I work for someone else now. I bought a new house for Sophie to live in after I filed for legal separation, so it's not an asset to our marriage. Since I have legal custody of the girls, I can use 60% of the money from the sale of the house to buy a new home, so I'm not sure what you can really do. Claire, by the way, if you research state laws, you'll find that once the children turn 14, they can choose who they want to live with. They chose me. You really are nothing, Alan. I bet you poisoned the girls' minds against Amy. I wouldn't do that. I'm not such a scoundrel. Anyway, even if I thought I should poison them, it wouldn't have been necessary. Amy did it herself, having neglected them for the last 3 years. You have a lot of work to do with them, Amy, to get them back. It's important for their well-being that they have a good relationship with their mother. She hasn't neglected them. She's a good mother. It's not what they think, Claire. She's been virtually absent from their lives for years. Amy, ask yourself who feeds them, who takes them to sports, who makes their school lunches, who helps them with their homework, who buys them clothes, who always remembers their birthdays and buys them presents, who goes to the movies with them, who do they go to with problems, who help them get through their first period, who gives them love and affection. I could go on and on. Well, Amy fell silent. It was obvious that she was having a hard time digesting what had happened. The girls asked me to see if you would meet them tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. at the Beachside Cafe. It was actually my idea since they really don't want to meet you. I'll tell them it's okay. She only nodded. I left them both and went back to my family. The next day, the girls told me that Amy kept bad-mouthing me and demanding that they live with her. Eventually, the girls excused themselves to go to the bathroom and just quietly left. I couldn't understand why she wanted to make up. She had been indifferent to me for years. Maybe I was just a convenient babysitter and housekeeper for her. When Alan told me he was leaving for another woman, I was in complete shock. I thought he loved me. Despite several attempts to reconcile, he wanted nothing to do with me, and we only communicated when exchanging our daughters for visits. My girls were openly hostile, making visits unpleasant. They would happily run to their new stepmother, which infuriated me. Eventually, I told them not to come unless they wanted to. I had envisioned my life continuing as it had, my lover on the road and my husband at home. Alan leaving was a huge shock and emotional blow. Over time, I realized he was right. I had been an absent wife, focusing all my love and emotional energy on Dan for the last years, leaving almost nothing for Alan. It was surprising he stayed as long as he did. Unable to afford my house and child support, I moved into a tiny apartment, spending nights alone watching TV and eating takeout. Dan's attitude changed when Alan left me. He became too busy with his family to spend time with me, sending me on business trips alone and saying I could handle the clients. Our emotional connection faded. 6 months after my marriage ended, Dan announced he was moving to another city for a new job. Tearfully, I asked him to never contact me again. Suddenly, I was a divorced woman. I couldn't help but think of the line from a Joni Mitchell song, "You don't know what you've got until it's gone." I foolishly thought I could have it all. Alan was now with a beautiful woman who was impossible to hate, and he was glowing with happiness, just like he was when we were young. My girls were much happier, too, treating Sophie as their mother and seeing me as an annoying relic of their past. It was very painful. I hit rock bottom when I complained to my girls about my situation, and Lauren looked at me coldly. "So, did you leave your father after all?" I know I wasn't the perfect wife and was neglectful, but he left me for another woman. "Mom, he left you because you had an affair with your boss for 3 years. The look on my face said it all. I was so ashamed. Alan had known all along but hadn't said anything. My life was a mess. I had lost a good husband and my daughters. True to his word, Alan advised our girls to keep in touch with me. Gradually, they began visiting willingly and sometimes stayed overnight. One evening, as I drove the girls to their new home, I asked Alan for a chat. We got out of the car and I faced him. "Lauren told me you know about Dan and me. I'm sorry, Alan. You were a good husband, and you didn't deserve this. I was selfish and got what I deserved." He nodded. "Why didn't you tell me you knew, Alan? Maybe you could have stopped me in time." "By the time I found out, it was too late." "When did you find out?" "I caught you with your boss at the office Christmas party last year. After that, I did some digging and found out everything. I have to admit it amused me when you were stuck in Bali alone. Oh God, I feel miserable. Why didn't you confront me?" "I was angry and wanted you to feel my resentment. I found out you're not the first secretary your boss has slept with. He has a history of using and dumping women. I decided the best way to punish you was to stay quiet and let things unfold. If I made a scene, his wife might divorce him, freeing him to be with you. I figured you'd feel worse if you thought I left you for another woman. Your strategy worked perfectly. My life is a mess. I'm sorry you were hurt so badly. Well, a little sorry. You don't need to apologize. It was my fault. If you had done what I did, I would have walked away from you. Looking back, I was seduced by excitement and became dependent to it. I tried to stop early on, but it was too late. I became obsessed and forgot about you and our girls. For a while, my anger has subsided, Amy, and I forgive you. I've also become philosophical about it. After all, I wouldn't be with Sophie now if you hadn't cheated on me. Yes, I know. That's what hurts the most. Our marriage was challenging from the start. Sophie, I don't think you're a bad person. You made a big mistake, but he was a skilled manipulator. You didn't have a chance to fully mature and experience normal teenage life, including dating and figuring out who you wanted to be with. You were vulnerable, and your boss took advantage. You're probably right, Alan, but why did you have to tell the girls about him? It was too harsh, no wonder they hated me. I didn't tell them, Amy. They found out themselves. They came back to our old house unexpectedly and caught you both in the living room. Remember? Just after we moved out. I couldn't recall at first. Then the memory hit me with horror. What did they see? Pretty much everything, even Emma. Lauren described it to me in detail. My body tensed with shame and I burst into tears, leaning into Alan's comforting embrace. He held me tightly, consoling me as I sobbed into his chest. Eventually, he carried me inside and laid me on the couch. Sophie and everyone else were kind and supportive, urging me to stay and join them for dinner. Seeing Alan happy with his new family, I felt the weight of my mistakes as I walked out to the car that evening. He put both hands on my shoulders. Amy, don't keep blaming yourself. We faced challenges from a young age, becoming parents and committing to each other. Our marriage lasting 14 years is a testament to both of us. Look at the positives. Our mistakes brought us 2 wonderful daughters, a legacy that can never be taken away. You're right, Alan. Speaking of mistakes, I've made another. Sophie is pregnant, so we're getting married sooner than planned. You seem prone to mistakes. You're a good man and a good husband, Alan. Better than I deserved. I wish you well. I hugged him and kissed his cheek before leaving, feeling regretful. Why did I forgive her so easily? For several reasons. Because holding on to hate can consume you and embitter you, because she was enduring a form of punishment just by seeing me with Sophie. There was still a lingering bond between us despite everything. Although I initially wanted to punish Amy, my true revenge was aimed at her boss Dan, who had seduced her away from me. I hacked into his computer and sent him an email disguised as Amy containing a hidden Trojan horse that granted me full access. I uncovered evidence that he had been embezzling from his former and current employers. I gathered substantial proof and anonymously sent it to both companies and the authorities. At his trial, he pleaded guilty and received a 1-year prison sentence. Throughout the trial, his wife stood by him, but after I showed her incriminating evidence of his numerous affairs, she ended their relationship on the spot. To complete my revenge, I visited Dan in prison. Initially, he didn't recognize me. Hi, Dan, we've met before. I'm Amy's ex-husband. What the hell do you want, prick? To deliver a message. The first one is from Amy. She sends her regards and hopes you're enjoying your new accommodations, which I helped you settle into personally. What you really should have hired professionals to encrypt your computer. It took me only 15 minutes to unlock everything after I hacked into it. I couldn't resist forwarding it all to the police. After he finished cursing at me, I continued. Also, I hope you don't mind, but I paid a visit to your wife and showed her all those compromising photos and videos I found of you and your mistresses. Needless to say, she was livid. She insisted on getting even, and I couldn't refuse. I don't understand why she wasn't enough for you. Nonsense. She wanted me to show you these. I spread the photos out in front of him. They had been doctored with Photoshop, but he didn't know that. She said to tell you that she'll never visit you here again, and you'll never see your children. I gave her the name of my lawyer who will handle her divorce from your sorry bum. The expression on his face was priceless. Yes, revenge is indeed a dish best served cold.
My cheating wife got pregnant while my best friend was living with us. But the thing is, I had a secret vasectomy done to me years ago. So I simply played along until I had proof of their affair and did this. So I recently discovered that my wife, Devin, was having an affair with my best friend, Jeff. And I found this out because she's pregnant. You might ask yourself, Opie, but if she's pregnant, how do you know? Well, I got a vasectomy in my previous marriage. So I know my wife has been screwing around on me because there's no way she can get pregnant from me. And some of you might be thinking, Op, you can still get pregnant with a vasectomy, don't come at me with that. There's a less than 1% chance that I got her pregnant. And we've taken tests since then to prove that it's not mine, so there. Some context. So my best friend, Jeff, recently went through a divorce earlier this year. And I grew up with this guy since we were in grade school. I mean, we're basically brothers. We were both the best man at each other's weddings. We went to college together and took the same courses. We ended up in the police force together and stationed at the same place. You get it? So I first got married when I was 20, and my ex-wife, Trish, and I were high school sweethearts. I was the small-town hockey star who everyone knew was going somewhere. She was this smart, cute, funny pastor's daughter who everyone loved. Anyways, we ended up having our daughter when we were 21 and my son when we were 24. We had a miscarriage in between the two. After my son, My ex-wife and I decided we didn't want any more children, so we decided that I should get a vasectomy. So without telling anyone, I didn't feel like I had to announce it to the world. I went in for a simple lunch surgery and went back to work, and no one was the wiser. My ex-wife and I ended up drifting apart, and we separated amicably. It's not that we didn't love each other, we did, but the love just changed. She had started up this home organization business after the kids were old enough to be a bit more independent, and she got really successful with that and wanted to make the brand bigger. So she put in a lot of time with that, and I was still really passionate about what I was doing, and I was getting deployed all over Canada to teach and whatnot. So we both just kind of drifted apart, but we still fully supported each other and the lives we were both leading. My ex-wife and I are still really great friends, and we see each other constantly, and all of us have even shared holidays together. Anyways, Devin and Trish were on good terms, and they even went out and did things without me too. They had a great relationship. So then this brings me to Jeff and his wife. We all spent a lot of time together, and we did a Friendsmas thing and a Friendsgiving every year. We all spent a lot of time camping together. We did a lot together. And so when he said that he was getting a divorce from his wife Amy, it sort of hit the friend group hard, and we tried our best to support them in whatever way they needed. However, Amy really gave it to Jeff hard and was saying that she was going to take the kids to Ontario to be with her parents who still live there. So naturally, Jeff was devastated on hearing this, and he tried his best to keep his kids here. But alas, she ended up moving there and did, in fact, take the kids with her. So it was rough to see him go through, and it was hard to see him being treated like that and getting his kids taken away. So in this time, he really leaned on us, and because they had to sell the house, we let Jeff stay with us for a little bit until he landed on his feet again. Well, it turned into a little bit longer than we would have liked. Then Devin sort of had this idea that we could renovate the garage and turn it into a suite. So I complied, and Jeff was really gracious about it and helped out and spent a lot of time making it his own. Whatever, it was a bit of an annoyance, but I wanted to help in any way that I could. And it was better than him staying in our house. At least he was out of the house and in his own space, so that Devin and I could have proper alone time without worrying if Jeff was going to hear, if you catch my drift. Okay, so now Devin. Devin worked as a dispatch agent for a little bit, and that's how we met. And the job is actually really stressful, so she managed to stick it out for 2 years, and now she works as a hair stylist and loves it. Devin and I met a few months after the divorce with Trish was finalized. We hit it off really well. She's actually 8 years older than I am. She said that she didn't want any kids, and she was really fun. Like really fun and wild. We had our motorcycles and went on hunting trips. She was like one of the guys, but like a chick. And a chick that wanted to get down and dirty with you, low. That's a horrible explanation, but you get it. She was fun. She was everything that I needed at the time. We had the same interests, and we had a lot of the same hobbies. And because she had mentioned that she didn't want any kids, I thought, wow, great. I don't have to worry about telling her that I had a vasectomy. So the topic never came up. Yes, I know. I'm a horrible person. I never told her that I had a vasectomy. But because the topic of kids never really came up, that was sort of it. She obviously was the best stepmom to my kids, and she had always said that that was enough. She wasn't even the marrying type until I just felt like, yeah, I want to spend the rest of my life with this woman, and it just feels right. It's not like she was against marriage or anything, but she just didn't expect it, you know? She didn't need to get married. She was so chill that way, and I love that about her. So we ended up having this small, intimate, backyard wedding and a fire with a barbecue, and it was perfect. It was perfect for us and all we needed. So yeah, shortly after we got married, Jeff went through his divorce. He was staying with us. Blah blah. Now, we worked together, but we weren't on the same team. So he had different shifts than I did. And Devin had a really lax schedule too. So a lot of times, Devin and Jeff were at home together alone. And at first I thought it was just Devin being helpful and a good friend. But after a while, he definitely started getting weird. I'd text her during the day and ask how her day was doing, and she'd say, "Oh, Jeff and I are just out for lunch," or "Jeff and I are just out running errands." And I'm like, okay, weird. But then they were going to movies together. And then they'd go to concerts together. And then when I was home, I saw little things that rubbed me the wrong way. Like he'd touch her arm when she was talking to him. She'd touch his bicep when he made her laugh. She'd dish him up food, and she wouldn't dish me up food. And then she'd constantly bring him up like, "Oh, Jeff told me about this." Or Jeff said the funniest thing. And I was like, okay, red flag. Definitely raised my suspicions. Then even though he was literally up in the garage suite, they'd text into the wee hours of the morning and she'd be giggling and texting him. And there I'm laying next to her in bed and honestly, I'm trying to start something up, trying to give her a massage or something, get in the mood, and she wouldn't be interested. She'd just keep texting him. So I'd just roll over and just fall asleep and she'd be texting him. Then there would be little gifts here and there. He got her like bath stuff for the bathtub, and in one gift set there was massage oil. And after a week, I noticed that the bottle had been opened and used, but I didn't use it on her. At first I chalked it up to maybe she used it for lotion or something. But the thing is, this oil had a distinct smell. And I remember smelling it on Jeff a few times, but I never said anything. I was just sort of collecting all of this evidence and making mental notes. Then one day, we're laying in bed late at night, and she turns to me and she's like, I want a baby. And I'm like, what? And she's like, I think we should have a baby. And I'm like, we agreed not to. And she's like, I've just been thinking, and I think we should have a baby before we're both too old. And I'm like, Devin, like. And she's like, what do you mean you don't know? And I'm like, well, a baby is a lot. It takes a lot of time and energy. And then she got mad at me, and she's like, don't treat me like your old child. And then I said that I thought we went over this before. And she's like, we never really did. And I'm like, I feel like it was just an unspoken thing. And I feel like you said that you were okay without kids and were good with being a stepmom. And she's like, so I'm not allowed to change my mind. You won't let me be a mom? And I'm like, whoa, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I think we have to talk more about this and maybe now isn't the best time. And she's like, well, what would make it a good time? When will you want to talk about it? And I'm like, can we like sleep on it and talk about it tomorrow and make time for this tomorrow? And she got pissed and left the room. And yeah, I didn't have the heart in that moment to tell her I had a vasectomy, and it would be fiscally impossible for me to give her a child unless I went and got it reversed. And even then it's not 100%. And something was just sketchy about the whole conversation anyways. I thought it was weird that now, all of a sudden, she wanted a baby. She had never ever shown interest in anything like this before. My alarms are going off. I'm pretty sure I know what happened, but I need to play along a little bit here. The next day, I apologize and I'm like, yes, I'm game. Let's make a baby. She literally jumps for joy and we try like 5 times that day. Then about a week later, she hands me this box and in this box is a positive pregnancy test. I could have cried. I was stunned. I knew it couldn't have been mine. And I'm not an expert or anything. But can you find out a week after? I don't think it works that way. Anyways, let me know if I'm wrong here. But the point is, I had a hunch and I knew the baby wasn't mine. I knew it must have been Jeff's. So I started watching them closer. Both Devin and I had agreed not to tell anybody that we were pregnant right away. But when I was watching Devin and Jeff interact, I caught him grazing her belly at the side of my eye. I pretended like I didn't see, but he for sure touched her belly in a lovingly way. There it was. A few weeks after that, she tells me she's going to her doctor's for the first little exam to see how far along she was. And that Jeff was going to drive her because he had to do some running around in the area anyways. And I was like, no need. I'm taking time off because I want to be there. And she sort of smiled and was like, you don't have to do that. And I was like, I'm the father. I want to be there. And I kind of smiled and she weakly grinned and was like, great. Of course you do. So yeah, we ended up going to the appointment and the doctor does her thing with her and asks her when she thinks she's conceived. She gives her the date that we did the old deed. There's an ultrasound. And then the doctor comes back and says that she's 12 weeks. And I'm like, how is that possible? And I look at her and she's like, Doc, is this for real? And she's acting all shocked and everything. And the doc is like, yeah, seems like you have a miracle. And I was like, whoa. And I pretend to be totally ecstatic to not tip her off that I knew anything I shouldn't. Then we go home, and when we're home I'm still pretending and she's like, oh, it was meant to be. What a miracle. I'm so excited. We end up having SAGs again that night, and I turned over and fell asleep. I had the next day off, but I knew she had to get up early because she had a wedding to do. I knew that was my chance to pack her shit and lock Jeff out of the suite. I knew Jeff also had to get up and go to work. So I did just that. I packed all of her garbage. I stockpiled it into our trailer, and I parked it on the street. I had a spare key to Jeff's suite. So I went in there and packed up his stuff too, and threw it into the same trailer. Then I put this big old lock on it so that he wouldn't get in. So Devin comes home first and sees this trailer parked there. I had changed the locks on the doors and the password to the garage so she couldn't get in. She's standing there and she's banging on the front door. I talk to her through our doorbell camera and I tell her that we're done and I know the baby isn't mine. She's saying that I'm out of my absolute mind and calling me crazy, and she's bawling and making a big scene, and I can see our neighbors looking out their doors and windows. And I'm like, this baby isn't mine. It's Jeff's. And she's like, don't be insane. Why would it be Jeff's? And I'm like, you tell me. And she's like, how could this baby not be yours? And I'm like, there's a less than 1% chance, and I know that because I have a vasectomy. And she literally dropped her purse and her bags onto the ground. She stood there in disbelief. And she's like, let me explain. And she starts trying to babble on, and I'm like, save it. I know it's not mine. And I'm like, we're done. It's over. I was nice enough to pack the trailer for you. Get out of here. And then she calls someone, and I'm guessing it's Jeff, because then he shows up in a matter of minutes in his patrol car. He sees what's happening, and he sees the lock on the garage suite. He tells me that I'm losing my mind, and that the kid couldn't possibly be his. And unlike I'll believe it when I see a paternity test. Edit. K people have been asking how she never knew, and how she didn't suspect not getting pregnant before. Well, she was on birth control pills for PCOS. Or so she told me. Supposedly, she was in the process of swapping pill brands, and just so happened to get pregnant with Jeff's baby. Bad timing. Not only that, but she had this thing against, well, man juice, to put it lightly. She was absolutely repulsed by it. She refused that I ever finished in her, and she rarely ever pleased me in other ways because the sight of it disgusted her. I won't go into details, but yeah, update. So, getting divorced. Again. Another failed marriage feels like absolute dump, but what can you do? In the midst of the divorce, Devin did end up getting a paternity test, and it only confirmed what I had believed. The baby is in fact Jeff's. And I guess he knew all along and was willing to play along and thought that he could just live in the garage suite forever and raise his baby as Uncle Jeff from afar. A buddy of mine did me a huge favor and got Jeff transferred to a small northern town literally in buttfuck nowhere. Devin, I guess, followed him up there. She was just trying to pretend that I impregnated her so that I didn't catch on to the affair she was having with Jeff. But turns out my little secret snip saved me from raising a kid that wasn't my own. By the time she realized she was pregnant, though, it was a bit late. Trish and I talk every day. She checks in on me, and she's being an absolute sweetheart. I'm spending a lot of time with my kids and just trying to get by and be the best dad that I can be. Alright, second cheating story. My wife cheated. So I left her and karma hit her hard when this happened. Everyone was right. I'm so crushed. My post history details what happened. Well, everyone here was right. I had an anonymous phone call at work today. He told me she was screwing around on Snapchat. I called her and told her to get home now. I forced her to sign in and saw everything. Over 15 guys getting sex and naked pics for the last 6 months. It gets worse. After some pressure and a long argument, I convinced her I'd stay if she told me the whole truth. She screwed someone in my bed, in my home. I gave her everything. I gave her my whole life. We grew up together, with each other since 17, 13 years down the drain. I'm so freaking destroyed. My poor kids. My poor babies. I took a ring off and walked out. Lawyers tomorrow. I'm so screwed up right now. I can't even think. I was stupid and did not read the rules properly. Update posted below. Update. I went to the house today, as I should not have left originally. I sat her down and told her how it is. It's my parents' house. She is to leave. Tonight. I'm giving her 2 days to get her affairs in order, and then taking the new vehicle I just purchased for her and selling my Mustang as I need a 6-seater. Then she cannot afford the payments on the vehicle. She's had a comfortable home wife life, and an entry-level job will not pay for that SUV, and I'm not paying it for her. Unfortunately, I cannot afford a lawyer, so I have applied for legal aid. 10 business days to even hear if I qualify. In lieu of that, we grew up a separation agreement together. She gets nothing. I'm giving her $200 to get on her feet. She'll have no vehicle by Friday. She has to leave the house. Kids stay with me until she can find housing, then we'll revisit custody split. So far, neither of us has any interest in changing the kids' lives. She has agreed to sign divorce papers and asked for nothing is signed in the agreement. I already paid the phone bill for the month, so she can keep it until October 20th. Then she is either to pay the balance and transfer to her own name, or I cut off the phone. I work nights, but it sounds like my job is willing to give me a transfer on today's shift, so I can be there for the kids and not have her in my house any more than necessary. Today was absolutely the hardest day of my life. So absolutely crushed and broken. She finally formally apologized on her way out. A real proper apology. When she started her vehicle, I closed the door and collapsed against it, bawling. I don't feel like I can handle this right now. It took everything I had to come back from the first time this happened. I am so utterly destroyed. Update. Post history has details. I'll spare the explanation again. 3 days out from the worst day of my life. Our anniversary is tomorrow. It would have been 14 years together. I keep finding myself making excuses of texture. Random crap about the kids. I hate myself as soon as I hit send. Because of the way everything went down, she has been here every day. Not sleeping here, but spending the day with the kids. I'm pissed off because I don't even get the validation of telling her how I feel for the sake of being a bigger person. I have to save face with the sake of the kids. She pretty much got off scot-free in that regard. I pulled the ring off her finger and walked out, which felt pretty good and a little badass at the time. But now, there's so much crap I wanted to say to her about how she destroyed everything. My life and our children's. I can't say anything to her because I'm fearful if we fight, she'll try to take me for everything. And right now, she's being good about that kind of stuff. Not that we had much anyway. But on the eve of her anniversary, I'm finding myself a little less sad today and more angry at her than anything. And all of her stupid little toxic friends that helped her hide it. She destroyed my career. I kicked her out. She has nowhere to go, so I cannot work. Now full-time dad to 4 kids. I'm being forced to sell my Mustang I've had for less than a year and I've dreamed about since I was 7. My kids are in utter emotional shambles. God, I could go on about everything she destroyed all night, but I'm pretty sure I'm rambling enough as it is. She went to a friend's wedding today. It's the first full day of no communication I've had with her in 13 years. I find myself typing out messages and deleting it, trying to make excuses to talk to her. Thing that bugs me the most is she didn't even try to call their kids today. No messages asking how they were doing, didn't call them to say goodnight. Nothing. I don't know. This has been a long rant.
I'm sorry.
Update. Post history goes through everything. I took a lot of advice from here to heart and have gone full no contact unless it's about the kids. It's been difficult. Ever since I started, she's been trying to emotionally pull me back to her. She keeps dropping sexual hints, trying to get me into bed, etc. But I came to a revelation about day 11 or 12 just out of nowhere. I got angry. I haven't really been angry through any of this. Sad, depressed, and everything else you can think of. Yes, but not angry. This was brought on by me accidentally stumbling upon one of the guys she had in her Snapchat. And I discovered he's older than my father, or around the same age. I don't know why of all the things that happened it took that to set me off. But now I don't see her as anything but disgusting. She's a gross pile of human stink that is just remnants of something I used to know. Also, her priorities have been making me hate her even more. Around here we have this thing called low-income housing. When you don't work or have kids, they will basically give you a place to live for free. A full-on 3 or 4 bedroom apartment. To me, and anyone logical, that would be the first phone call I would make. Here we are coming up on week 3, and she still has not made that call because her only priority has been finding her next lay. Whatever. She's out of my house, and I'm mentally planning to be the sole parent of these children. My father was in a similar situation when he was my age. After a year and a half, the woman in question signed over all of her rights to the children and walked away never to be seen again. I'm fully expecting that to happen to me the way things are going. I am still unable to return to work due to the fact that she chose to live with her friend in a 1-bedroom place. Custard right now with the kids is basically 97% me, 3% her. So as it stands, I'm going to remain on unemployment until she can get her act together. I have plenty of money saved and my employer was the one that suggested this, so no matter what, I have a job to go back to when this is over with. There's been some huge uplifts for me over the last 6 to 7 days as well. As soon as I changed my Facebook status to single, I had more women than I thought ever knew I existed adding me and trying to talk to me. I gotta say that made me feel pretty good. I'm not that great looking up a guy, but I guess in my age group stability and loyalty is rare. There's a girl I used to work with that started talking to me out of the blue that I always thought had a crush on me. We've been talking 12 hours a day for the last 4 days. Given how little my soon-to-be ex-wife put into our relationship, it feels flattering to be pursued. I've been clear with my intentions from the get-go, so we're just talking, but goddamn it's nice. And now it's the best part. This morning, day 18, I woke up on my couch and I was happy. I no longer miss her. I don't even realize when it happened. I just suddenly became self-aware that I hadn't thought of her in any way other than anger for at least 2 days. And I don't miss her being here. Hopefully things keep looking up, but so far things are moving along for me. Thanks for reading. Update. My post history has the details. It's way too long to post again. I haven't posted on here since about the first month. Things got pretty hectic and crazy. I'm not even right sure where to begin because there has been so many things happening. I think I'll just go month by month. We separated the end of September, and as previously stated, I had to walk away from my career to look after our children. Throughout the month of October and November, she skipped scheduled visits so much that I was unable to return to work in November like originally planned. Out of 18 scheduled visits, she saw them 6 times. Ended up filing for unemployment benefits, which I got approved for. Instead, I chose to focus on developing skills to work from home. In December, she started dating a guy and forced the children into an introduction with him by having them over to his house for the weekend. She had known him approximately 2 weeks at this point. He ended up dumping her 3 days before Christmas. In January, she decided to move to a different town. Things went from an agreed upon 50-50 to her only seeing them on weekends. She tried to introduce the children to another guy. Thankfully, she listened to me the time and opted not to. She skipped many of her visits, got one of her boy toys to message me on her birthday demanding the children call her, and rarely calls. February, I believed she saw them twice. Around the middle of February, she decided that when she secures her own housing, the children are going to live with her, with me only being able to see them 6 days a month. We had a written agreement done up that stated the deal was 50-50. So due to that, I did what I should have done months before and hired a lawyer. For all of this, she refused to get a job. She stole the government child benefits to live off of. I eventually got approved for this and back paid. She convinced one of her sexual partners to buy her a car. It blew up the first time she picked up the kids, and she refused to fix it, so all visitation has been at my expense. She skipped on average 60% of scheduled visitation. She calls maybe once a week, sometimes once every 3 weeks. And she stole from me knowingly and caused my insurance payments to bounce, almost causing a loss of coverage. I did manage to sell my car at no loss. Thankfully, this market is a seller's market. I unfortunately have not returned to work, but I am working on certifications to do something from home. The hours I can work when the kids are in school do not allow me to make enough money to make ends meet. Unemployment actually pays more. Throughout all this, I'm genuinely happy. All this stuff people told me it gets better, it gets easier, isn't necessarily true. I think they're situational. Her lack of empathy for her kids causes me a lot of stress and headaches. I went full no contact around November. Anyone reading this that made it this far? Do it. No contact was the best thing I could have done for myself. The girl I detailed talking to ended up confessing to having feelings for me. We decided to pursue and have been seeing each other for a little while. She's great and knows the traumatic things I went through are not easily forgotten, but she is willing to work through it with me, which is more than I can ask of another person. Alright, let's see some relevant comments replied by Opie. Pereira 55 says,
Eupia.
I'm happy that things are becoming better for you, but at the end you are dealing very well with all of this. No contact with her is the must. Pursue your new relationship since you had all the right to be happy. And had your girlfriend meet already your children? If yes, how is their relationship? Opie responds, no contact was extremely difficult, but it was the one move I made that helped secure my sanity. My girlfriend had already known the children for 2 years. She was a coworker and babysat for me on weird days sometimes. She does not have children of her own, so I slowly eased into things and let the children set the pace. It has been great so far. They love her and are always excited for our next outing. HPO21 says, hopefully you have kept records and have made copies for your attorney. She is an unfit mother, and perhaps the court will see that and officially give you custody. The OP replies, if there is any advice I can give to any fathers that end up going through a similar situation is that record everything and keep everything. Only communicate through text messages, don't do anything in person. Back everything up to multiple places. I did this from day one, and it has been my savior. When I went to see my lawyer, I handed her over 400 pages of evidence. Bell 17 says, good for you, mate. But I would be careful. No doubt your ex will try to do something to mess up your relationship, so record everything. Make a note for everything, just in case you need to get a restraining order or if she tries to take the kids. The OP replies, she has already tried. She went on a ramble a couple of weeks ago about how much she misses me and tried to accuse me of cheating on her while we were married. I am an open book with my girlfriend and tell her about anything and everything in regards to my soon-to-be ex-wife. And yes, I have records of every conversation dating back several years. I got into the habit a few years ago of not deleting things, and it has served me well. I headed my lawyer over 400 pages of evidence.
I'm a 44-year-old man, and my wife is 39. We've been married for over 15 years. Although we initially stopped at 4 kids, we're expecting a surprise baby in December. It's a significant event since my wife hasn't been pregnant in 5 years. While she's excited, it becomes problematic when she brings it up in inappropriate situations. For instance, there was a tragic hit-and-run incident in our town, and during the vigil, my wife said something like, I'm so thankful that our baby is okay. I couldn't live with myself if this vigil was for one of our children or the baby. I know a few people were hurt because they gave us dirty looks and scoffed. I love my wife, but there are things you just shouldn't say, especially when a couple is mourning their dead child. But this post isn't about that situation. It's about something else entirely. My brother married a woman who immigrated from Iran a little over 8 years ago. She's a lovely woman, and we're happy to have her as part of the family. If you're familiar with the protests in Iran, you can understand where this is going. My sister-in-law has been anxious and having breakdowns because she can't reach some of her family members. Some of her relatives have been protesting, and after hearing about Serena Esmailzade's passing, she deteriorated even more. She's been crying, not eating, and avoiding showers. She cut off all her hair to show support, but what she really needs is to know that her family is okay. My wife and I visited them, brought some meals, and planned a spa day for the ladies. While eating, my sister-in-law began to cry silently. My wife, instead of offering comforting words, said to her, I know how you're feeling. This pregnancy has been hard. It's hard to eat, and I cry that something might go wrong because of my age, but both of us will make it through this. Now let's go to the salon and do something about that hair. My wife had a genuine smile on her face, and my sister-in-law cried even harder. I apologized, escorted my upset wife out of their house, and got into the car, fuming. When my wife noticed I was upset and asked why, I said, Stop making everything about you in this pregnancy. Sister-in-law is having night terrors because of what's happening in her country, worried sick that her family members may possibly die for protesting, yet you go and compare her issue to your pregnancy. My wife tried to explain her reasoning, saying she was just trying to make her feel better. How was commenting on her hair and comparing her pregnancy to the situation in Iran going to help? My wife insisted she did nothing wrong, but there's a time and a place for everything. My wife went to her parents, and I've been getting calls from my in-laws accusing me of not caring about my wife's pregnancy. Am I at fault here? Yikes. This seems delusional. This pregnancy seems to have affected her worse than baby brain. I'm not sure what's going on. It's just plain rude and very selfish. She can't seem to look outside her own bubble. Pregnancy isn't easy for everyone, but completely disregarding other people's feelings is on another level. I wonder if she talks about it constantly because she's super insecure and maybe guilty about it. Update. Married for almost 20 years, we have 4 kids, and there's another one on the way. Recently discovered that my 39-year-old wife, due in December, has been cheating on me. Shockingly, my 14-year-old found out about the affairs. It's only been a couple of days, and I'm still trying to process everything. After reviewing the evidence, it seems the affair has been going on for over 4 years. I haven't confronted my wife about the affair yet, but I'm thinking about doing it soon, maybe after the baby is born. Even though the baby might not be mine, I still care deeply for my wife and don't want to cause damage. I realize I should probably start looking for legal advice, separate our finances, and gather more evidence. However, part of me wants to try to fix things, or at least avoid feeling both hatred and love for her. Initially, I thought about lying to my daughter to protect her mother, but she's too smart for that. I'm unsure how to navigate through this situation without letting hatred consume me, especially for the sake of our kids. The impending divorce will turn our lives upside down, and I'm worried about how it will affect our children. Considering a DNA test for the girls, aged 14, 10, and 5, twins, but it might hurt them. The possibility that the twins may not be my children adds another layer of pain. Just writing about this is giving me a headache. I've been calling out of work, but I need to get my head on straight. Update. The twins and the newborn aren't mine. I talked to my wife about it. She's sorry but doesn't regret it. She loves the other guy. Her parents knew about the affair long before I did and helped by letting them meet at their home to avoid embarrassment. They didn't want to risk humiliation and also didn't want to separate the twins from their real dad. Her whole family is heavily involved in the church. My 14-year-old and 10-year-old are staying with my brother and sister-in-law because I can't take care of them right now. They hate their mom, won't talk to her, and are both in therapy. I tried taking the twins to be with their sisters, but my wife resisted. I'm sure the affair partner is with her now. I saw his car heading to my in-laws' house. He's also married, and I've been in touch with his wife, who's filing for divorce. I haven't asked if they're trying to work things out, and frankly, I don't care. Screw him, my wife, and my stupid in-laws. I used to think my in-laws were uptight. I'm glad they're all being ostracized, kicked out of the church, and erased from its social media. I'm glad they're being humiliated, facing what they feared the most. My mother-in-law called me crying, asking me to clear things up. What's there to clarify? Father-in-law wanted me to work things out, but I asked if he'd do the same in this situation. He stayed silent before hanging up. My wife has been trying to reach out, but I refuse to answer. Seeing her frantic to contact me brings me a bit of satisfaction. I don't know what she wants, and I don't want to talk to her anytime soon, even though I know I'll have to. Before getting the results, I was ready to take her to court for custody of the twins. I feel pathetic. Going to work is a struggle, and my coworkers pity me. I don't even grocery shop anymore. I can feel everyone looking and whispering. I've lost about 15 pounds since this whole thing came to light. I can barely get any sleep. Therapy is not helping. This has been the worst year of my life. I regret not keeping quiet in the car a few months ago. If I had, I'd be enjoying time with the newborn and decorating the house. The house is silent. It should be loud with my daughters laughing and arguing. I should be changing diapers, hearing my wife try to outperform Mariah Carey. The house should smell sweet and be warm, filled with happiness and life. Now it's just cold, empty, and quiet. Everything I did feels like it was for nothing. I wanted a happy adulthood after a sad childhood, but I can't seem to win. I always lose. I don't feel like a man. I don't even feel human. Second story. I'm a 29-year-old woman who was married to my ex, a guy in his 30s, for 8 years. He cheated on me when I was pregnant with our second child in 2017. I forgave him, went to therapy, and thought he'd change. However, I caught him having another affair in 2021, so I decided to leave him. I used to rely on him for everything: finances, clothing, routine, everything. Leaving him was scary initially as he managed everything for so long. I got married at 20, quite young and naive, never having been on my own. So, I faced many challenges at the beginning. Fortunately, when I left, I already had a career, though it didn't pay much. He contributed 75% of our family income, so I feared affording an attorney, but I did it. I saved money and hired a reasonably priced local attorney who guided me through the divorce, and I obtained primary custody. The divorce was finalized in May 2022. I lived with my mom from October 2021 until October 2022. I distinctly remember him telling me when I left that I'd never succeed without him, never afford an apartment for me and the kids, that everything I was owed to him. This drove me to work hard this year to achieve my dreams independently. I took extra jobs, sold my beloved truck, saved money rigorously, and I'm thrilled to say it's true. You can make it on your own. As a single mom, your situation may seem tough now, but you can make it. I'm pleased to say I closed on my home in October. A beautiful 1,400 square foot house on a 0.3-acre lot in an amazing neighborhood. The mortgage takes almost half of my monthly income, but I don't mind. I'm happy on my own. I did it on my own. I attend therapy every Saturday, have a good routine with my sons. We get to come home every day, eat, wear, and do whatever we want. I'm even seeing a guy and I don't feel insecure. I love my life right now. I decided not to forgive again. The hard work and struggle were entirely worth it. I'm not sure how my life will develop in the next few years, but I'm proud to say it will happen on my terms. And I survived infidelity. P.S. He didn't call CPS on me because I called his bluff and told him it was a crime to make a malicious call. He backed off. Still a pain, but that's another story. I love you all, and I hope you achieve success and peace, which you will. Good night from Texas. Third story. Background. My girlfriend, Hannah, and I were raised in a sizable town with almost 20,000 people. Even though we both went to the same high school, we never crossed paths until a few years ago when we started talking seriously. After finishing college, I got a job that involved a lot of travel within the state. Wanting to handle business in both the state and my hometown, I asked for an office at my hometown's branch. They agreed since there were no business representatives there. After a few months, I settled into a routine of 1 to 2 weeks at the city office, 1 week in my hometown, and 1 to 2 weeks traveling around the country. After a year, I made the decision to buy a house in my hometown. I met Hannah at a Friday party right after returning from one of my trips. While checking paperwork in my office, Craig, the managing director, and a colleague walked in. Craig and I had grown up together, forming a close friendship, despite attending different high schools since college. He asked how things were, and invited me to a house party that he and his buddies were throwing that evening. Despite the short notice, I said yes, thinking a few drinks with friends would be beneficial. At the party, Craig introduced me to Hannah, a new hire at the branch in my hometown. We hit it off right away, having attended the same high school. Everything went smoothly. Hannah got along with my parents, and her parents were happy that someone could make her as happy as she was. Despite her past relationship issues and struggles with depression, we decided to take the next step after 2 years of dating, and she moved into my house in my hometown. Everything was going well for nearly a year. Then, things started to change. FaceTime sessions were cut short, or she claimed to be too busy to answer the phone. Suddenly, neighbors started telling me about a car, described as similar to my friend Craig's, a black Chevy Camaro. It was always seen parked in the back alley near my house whenever I was away, or clothes not mine were found in my wardrobe. All signs pointed to her cheating, but she insisted that nothing was happening, and I was overthinking things. She explained that Craig would occasionally come over to discuss business, etc., but never stayed the night. I brushed it aside, considering myself paranoid, and carried on as if nothing was wrong. Yet, there was always this nagging feeling that something wasn't quite right. I discovered she had been lying to me. Nearly 6 months later, after completing a rather large contract with a new company, I decided to book an earlier flight home and surprise everyone. Fast forward a few hours, as I drove into my hometown and down the alley behind my house to surprise Hannah without being seen, a part of me was curious about whether this mystery car was there. Sure enough, a car was blocking the back entrance gate. Confused for a moment, I realized it was Craig's car, a black Chevy Camaro. If it hadn't been for the high hedge, the line I had put in a few years back for privacy, I might have driven past my own place. Pulling up behind his car, I got out and found it strange that he was there so late, contrary to what she claimed, that he always left by now. Approaching the back of the house, I saw something that made my heart drop into my stomach. There in the kitchen, Hannah and Craig were passionately involved. I stood there, completely still, as if time had frozen. My best friend and my girlfriend were having closeness on my dining table in my own house. I felt lost, not knowing what to do, with a rush of thoughts flooding my mind. Was I dreaming or was this reality? Why were they engaging in such a private act in my home? Feeling disheartened, I turned away without them noticing. I drove for what seemed like an eternity, shedding tears, but my sadness quickly transformed into anger. I had a strong desire to damage them, but violence was against my principles. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands and bring ruin to both of their lives. And what better time to start than now? I drove back up the alley, positioning myself far from my driveway to still see Craig's car. Then, I walked back to the gate, where I could peer into the house, and called her phone. When it rang, both of them glanced at the caller ID, shocked to see my name. I noticed she was considering answering, and they let it ring for a moment before getting back to their activities. The phone rang again, and this time she picked up. As she answered, I hung up and returned to my car. Moments later, she called me back, questioning why I was calling so late. I informed her I was about 15 minutes from home and didn't want to startle her upon my arrival. She appeared surprised and happy about my return. The call ended shortly after she mentioned getting up to change. I bid farewell and hung up. A few moments later, Craig rushed through the gate half undressed, hopped into his car and sped away. I chuckled a bit, knowing the fear they must have felt being so close to getting caught. I waited a while before turning my car into the same spot Craig had occupied moments earlier. The night remained relatively uneventful, and it wasn't until after she fell asleep that I got up and went to my office down the hall. Sleep evaded me. I needed a plan, and plan revenge I did. My mother always taught me to be a pacifist and let karma take its course. However, on this occasion, I felt karma needed a nudge. I decided to punish them separately but thoroughly. I knew Craig had a minor medication habit, though nothing major, and he kept it well hidden. I discovered it accidentally when I stumbled upon him using cocaine in his office, but I pretended not to notice. Some weeks later, I had friends over, including Craig, for some drinks. After ensuring Craig was sufficiently drunk, I told him to stay the night. I took his office keys, drove to our branch office, and went to work, knowing he was deeply intoxicated and wouldn't wake until morning. I searched his desk and drawers, especially the one where I had seen him stash his cocaine. Upon further examination, I found a false bottom. Lifting it, I hit the jackpot. While I thought he used regular medicaments like white powder, what I saw was much worse. He had various substances in there. I took photos, put everything back, and before leaving, I installed a small spy button camera from Alibaba right above the door. Everything was set, and the plan was gradually coming together. Judging by the medicaments I found in his drawer, Craig had to be using medicaments at least twice a day. I once suggested to my girlfriend that we install CCTV cameras for added security, but she hesitated due to concerns about hacking. Reflecting on it now, I understand her worries. So before returning to the city for a flight, I staged a break-in by smashing the back pane of my back door into my kitchen, leaving it open. Upon arriving, I received several messages. One from my visibly panicked mom, who found the back door smashed and called the police. Another from a distraught Hannah in tears, and one from the local police asking me to call. After returning the calls, I informed the police I was away on business and would talk to them the following week. While away, I had Hannah stay with my parents until my return. I asked my dad to arrange for a local security company to install cameras and an alarm system, getting approval from the police to avoid disrupting the crime scene. After getting home, I went through the routine of expressing disbelief and questioning why this happened. I had the security company representatives guide Hannah and me on how the cameras and alarm system worked. Finally, the question I had been anticipating came up. What if we engage in business, and I prefer not to have a record of it? When she asked, she pretended to be shy, but I understood the true reason behind her question. He reassured us that it was a common inquiry, and demonstrated on the home computer how to prevent recording for specific cameras, ensuring her privacy. While seeing him off, I inquired whether turning off the cameras could trigger a security notification, to which he returned, guided me through setting up email notifications, and then left. Subsequently, after Hannah's grocery shopping, I strategically placed spy button cameras all around the house, creating an ideal setup. Now, all I needed to do was wait. At this point, I sought guidance from legal advice groups on Reddit regarding the couple's law in my country. I wanted assurance that my upcoming plan could be executed legally without facing financial obligations to Hannah. I didn't want any surprises where she could claim money. A shout out to the helpful individuals on Reddit who connected me with a fantastic lawyer. He assured me that, despite dating for nearly 4.5 years, we hadn't lived together long enough to be classified as a de facto couple. The fact that I covered all utilities on the property she lived in without paying rent demonstrated she had no legal standing to make a financial claim. Just to be sure, he drafted a solid legal document. More positive news followed when my boss offered me a promotion to lead the team in the city, reducing my travel. Due to the success of my hometown's office, they considered having 5 to 7 representatives spend 1 to 2 weeks in larger surrounding towns, including my hometown. As part of my team, I accepted and initiated the transfer process, which would take about 6 weeks. It was perfect, more than enough time to gather all my evidence. Upon returning to my hometown the following week, I began executing the rest of my plan. I requested a favor from Craig to approve 1 week's vacation for Hannah for 2 weeks. I wanted to send her and a friend or two on a short break. He agreed, congratulated me on being ready to retake the leap, and reserved the week for me. I asked him not to disclose anything as I wanted to make it a big surprise, fully aware that news would spread around the office. That was my plan. That night, I informed Hannah that I had booked her and 2 friends for an all-expenses-paid tropical spa resort trip for a week. I instructed her to pick 2 friends and return to the biggest surprise of her life. I then shared that the following week, I would be in the city preparing for a crucial client, and I wouldn't be home until the Monday she was leaving, disappointing her a bit, but I assured her it would be worth it when she returned. What I omitted was my decision to take a 2-week vacation on the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for the challenges that would arise the moment she stepped foot on the plane, while also relishing my first taste of freedom on Sunday. 2 weeks later, I returned by flight and began driving home. Upon arrival, I quickly passed by my house, confirming Craig's car was there. Similar to the initial night I caught them, I parked a bit away and checked the live CCTV cameras, but they were nowhere to be found. Switching to the spy cameras, including the one hidden in the bedside lamp, I discovered them engaged in relationship activity in my bedroom. Since we hadn't installed any CCTV in our bedroom, she probably felt it was a secure place on our bed. Not surprisingly, I had consistently recorded them doing this over the 2 weeks I was away. I then placed my first call to the police, hiding my caller ID. I informed them that, as a concerned neighbor, I observed someone lingering in their car in the alley behind my house, occasionally passing items to passing cars, and appeared to be dealing medicaments. Worried about the situation, I provided Craig's car license plate and description, identifying him as the suspected dealer. They assured me they'd have someone there shortly, so I thanked them and hung up. Next, using a newly created email, I sent all the videos from the spy cam capturing Craig in his office doing medicaments and the photos from the other night to his boss. I also alerted Hannah, telling her I was about 10 minutes from home and eager to surprise her. Reflecting on the footage later, I chuckled at the chaos I caused and was surprised I didn't hear any commotion. In a matter of seconds, Craig emerged, half-dressed, and rushed out to his car through the back door. It was a perfect scene. Craig sped away, and one of the police cars behind me gave chase. After warmly welcoming an excited Hannah and going through typical couple activities, she fell asleep. However, I couldn't sleep a wink. The next day, she and her friends were driven away. Once they left, I waited a few hours before initiating my plan. I contacted a friend who worked as a removalist, apologized for the short notice, and arranged for my place to be packed and moved. On Friday, we agreed on a time, and I instructed him to take specific boxes to a storage facility, which he agreed to without a problem. Then, I began packing Hannah's belongings. Later that day, I received a call from the police asking me to identify if I knew Craig and whether I suspected him of any suspicious activities or medicament involvement. Given our town's strict stance on medicament law enforcement, I expressed pretended shock and denied any knowledge. It turned out they had apprehended Craig the previous night with a significant amount of hard and illegal medicaments in his vehicle. Smiling to myself, I was pleased that my plan for Craig had come to fruition. By this point, the town was buzzing, as news events in my hometown don't stay secret for long. Craig faced disgrace and was swiftly fired due to his medicament possession. That night, I visited my parents and informed them, along with Hannah's parents, about the situation. I omitted some details and mentioned that I was moving back to the city after a promotion, but Hannah wouldn't be joining me. Initially upset for not being kept in the loop, they were eventually pleased that I handled things maturely and didn't stoop to their level, although they disagreed with the decision to ghost Hannah. After some drinks, laughs, and tears, I headed home on Friday afternoon after a busy week organizing cleaners for the following week, coordinating with the real estate agent to put my house on the rental market, and handling various tasks at my hometown's office. I packed some things into my car, drove to my parents' place, said goodbye, and before leaving, visited Catherine's house. Catherine, one of Hannah's childhood friends, and the only other person aware of the situation, played a crucial role. Without her help with the details about Craig, I probably wouldn't have been able to organize everything as quickly. I handed Catherine a large manila folder with evidence of Hannah's cheating, along with a letter and legal documents from my attorney instructing Hannah not to contact me and providing details on how to access her belongings in the storage unit I rented. After a quick goodbye, I left and drove back to the city. On Sunday, I woke up to several missed calls, voice messages, and text messages. It turned out Hannah had returned early, alarmed by something in town, only to find an empty house and a "for rent" sign out front. Panicking, she went to my parents, who closed the door on her, forcing her to contact everyone until she reached Catherine, informed that she had a package. I learned she didn't take it well, evident from the numerous angry texts and voice messages accusing me of framing Craig and being deceitful. I feared she'd show up at my front door, but nothing happened. 6 weeks later, having left and received a promotion, I'm happy and settled.